Okay, thank you everyone. I think that we'll make a start. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. We're really hoping that we have a wonderful conversation today. So I'm just going to start things by introducing the moderators for the session and also explaining how the session will run. And what would be really helpful would be perhaps if people were not speaking, if you could keep your mute on. If you're not speaking, that would really help everybody's audio quality. My name's Jane Anderson. I'm the co-founder of Live Projects Network, and I lead the undergraduate architecture programme at Oxford Brookes University. I'm going to be moderating this session with Ursula Hartig. Ursula is the co-founder of the Design Build Exchange and is based in Berlin. And also organising this session are Rohini Singh of the Curry Stone Foundation and Leanne Andrews of the Pacific Rim Design Network. I'm going to just share my screen to show you the programme for today. Hopefully you can see a programme for today. So our aim for this conversation is to focus on the stories that are behind some of the projects that exemplify the idea of design for the common good. We're hoping that by hearing the stories that are told by the designers, the community members and supporters of these projects, we'll be able to learn about the journey that many people took to undertake these projects. The online format will allow us to visit new places and meet new people all over the world. And we're inviting you to jump into that conversation today. So please, ask questions, share your perspectives and your experiences, because what we'd really like to do is exchange knowledge between all of us today and to make new connections for mutual support in the future. We're going to start with a keynote presentation by Akiko OKABE. As our expert, Akiko will also be helping to shape the conversation over the course of this session. She's going to give a keynote presentation that will be followed by 5 different projects presented in 2 blocks. And each of those 5 projects will be presented by the designers, the community members and the supporters who helped to make those projects happen. We're going to just give a short introduction to introduce each speaker just before they start their presentations. There will be 5 minutes of questions after each presentation. And after the first 3 projects, we'll have a longer 40-minute conversation session discussion for everyone. And there'll be a 20-minute break after those first 3 projects, and followed by the same format, presenting the last 2 projects with discussion sessions in the same as in the first block. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, Ursula. And Ursula, I'm going to hand over to Ursula, who's going to explain a little bit more about design for the common good and the various networks that make it up.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for being here with us and sharing your experience. I'm really, really curious to hear about your projects, and I think the audience as well. So I would like to introduce a little bit what are we, or what is Design for the Common Good. Design for the Common Good is a network of networks. We call it that way. It's an international alliance of networks. We and our members, and you, of course, are professionals and educators, students and citizen activists in the field of architecture and other design disciplines. We are committed to shape practice, education and research through to implementation and to improve the social, economic and environmental outcomes for its users. These networks that agree to collaborate are the Live Project Network, where Jane Anderson, the moderator, is a co-founder. Live projects are defined as projects that comprise the negotiation of a brief, a time scale, a budget, and a product between an educational organization and an external collaborator of their mutual benefit. They must ensure that the students gain learning that is relevant to their educational development. Live Projects Network shares a web platform, hosts conferences, and shares knowledge. The second network is the Pacific Rim Community Design Network. It's a network of community design educators and practitioners in the Pacific region. Its primary vehicle is a series of working conferences that are held every 2 or 3 years. Their goal is to provide an opportunity for practitioners and scholars to share and compare experience and advanced practice, research and teaching in the field of community design. The Social, Economic, Environmental Design Network, the SEED network, has the mission that every person should be able to live in a socially, economically, and environmentally healthy community. By sharing best practices and ideas, network members create a community of knowledge for professionals as the public based on their shared principles. SEED is co-organizing conferences and publications and is well known because of the SEED Award, which is presented regularly. Then we have the Curry Stone Foundation. The primary mission of the Curry Stone Foundation is to empower the practice of community-driven social impact design, especially to those who are in greatest need. The foundation, with its website, podcasts, and awards, actively advocates for the use of design as a tool for social change, to build a healthier, more vital community. The foundation supports the Community Design Agency in India, an organization of architects, engineers, artists, designers, community advocates, and business professionals, addressing cultural and social inequalities through the built environment. The last network is the Design Build Exchange Network. I'm co-founder of it. Another co-founder here is in the room, Peter Fattinger. Design Build Exchange is a network and an online platform dedicated to all stakeholders involved in academic design build. These are academic projects embedded in university programs, and they take students from their desks into the world of human interactions. And they allow them to be physically involved in the realization of their design. The platform provides tools for communication, collaboration, and exchange of knowledge. This year, for the Design for the Common Good Network, is a special year, as lots of events take place. So in February, there was the inauguration of a great exhibition at the Center for Visual Arts at the Metropolitan State University in Denver. It opened the 19th of February. It was curated by Lisa Abendroth. The 5 networks proposed a selection of their projects for this purpose, and you are part of it. These projects are guided by a shared vision for the potential of design in the public interest. They tell stories of community-driven processes that lead to real-life improvements. Then we have the conference series. This is the first conversation of 2 conversations. There is a conference tomorrow in Denver, but also online. And finally, there is a Design for the Common Good website. So our wish for a shared web platform has come true. And when you join this conversation, you might already know it. The Design for the Common Good website serves as a focal point for anyone interested and engaged in design for the common good. It gives you access to the Design for the Common Good community platform and connects you to this field of work, to inspiration, education, writing, research, and most importantly, to each other. Thank you for that. I hand over to Jane.
Thanks, Ursula. So that was a brief resume of Design for the Common Good. I'm just going to give you some very simple housekeeping information to make the conversation run smoothly today. So while the presentations are being given, if you could please use the Q&A, question and answer function that you can see to record your questions in advance, that would be really helpful. You can see the Q&A function if you hover your cursor at the bottom of the screen. You should see it, for me, it's at the bottom center of the screen. And that allows you to sort of preload your questions and it allows us to see them in advance and get them ready for a session at the end of each presentation. You'll also get the opportunity to speak and share your camera in the longer discussion sessions at the end of each block. You don't have to, but if you choose to, you can speak and share your camera. And you can do that by selecting the raise hand function, and that will help us to know that you would like to speak during the discussion. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function to communicate with us as moderators. Rohini is monitoring a live stream that we also have going on YouTube for anyone who's unable to join us via Zoom. And she will be filtering comments through from the viewers that are arriving via the YouTube live stream. So we've got another set of people watching it in that way who are unable to join us via Zoom. So Rohini will be feeding us those comments through. Okay, so hopefully that is all of the housekeeping and we can start the session. So we really hope that you enjoy it, and you know, please think of questions, because we really truly want this to be a conversation with an emphasis on storytelling and then questions and conversation, so that it involves all of you. So I'm going to start the first part by introducing Akiko OKABE, who is our keynote speaker, who's going to speak first. Akiko OKABE is based at Tokyo University. She's an architect and professor in environmental studies at the Graduate School of Frontier Sciences. After graduating from the University of Tokyo, she practiced as an architect at Arata, Isozaki and Associates in Barcelona. Professor OKABE began teaching at Chiba University in 2004. The latest book that she edited is called The Future Based on Sharing, and it was published in 2021. Professor OKABE's work on urban upgrading via stakeholder participation in Jakarta received the Regional Holcim Award in 2014. And also she received the Architectural Institute of Japan's Architecture Education Award in 2017. We're really delighted that you can join us today. And thank you so much for also in advance, thank you for guiding us through as we go through the conversations. You'll be with us through that part of the session too. We're very glad that you could join us today. So we're ready to hand over to you if you're ready to begin your keynote, Akiko.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'll share my screen. Okay. Can you hear the screen well? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start. Thank you very much for inviting me to this network of networks designed for the common good. It sounds quite good. Today, I'm going to discuss about design in the era of platform cooperativism, a post-capitalistic period. And I'll start by raising a question: who is the client? Or it will be better to say, who is the client? Who are the clients? I'm going to refer to cases in Rwanda and in Japan. Before starting, let me introduce briefly myself. I'm here today thanks to Sergio Parelloni. Maybe all of you may know him. First, I met him by chance in Japan. In 2016, just after the earthquake, I visited Chamanga in Ecuador with PUSE, University in Quito. It was a start of Chamanga project with Sergio and later with Ursula. Unfortunately, I couldn't visit after the completion of this project. Our project Gonjiro has been awarded by SEED and PACRIM in 2018, so I have a lot of connections with you. I have heard from Sergio several times his dream to launch a platform of networks. I would like to address my congratulations for the success of creating design for the common good. Okay, I have already raised the question, who is the client? Among the 30 works of Design for Common Good exhibition, clients are figured in almost all works, but I guess that you wondered who are more appropriate as clients. A friend of mine who has non-profit architectural projects in Rwanda, Eastern Africa, says that there are 5 clients for her. Her name is Yutaka Sho. She's Japanese, associate professor of Syracuse University in the United States. The following part of Rwanda is what I learned from her, including images. The 5 clients that she says are donors, the second, government of Rwanda, Northern academia, and local builders and designers, and local people. Each client has a voice different from others, rooted on his own aesthetics. First, donors prefer symbolic projects such as schools and community centers rather than sewage or housings. And through building them, the rise of quality of life of the poor should be promised and can be seen clearly. Second, government of Rwanda. For one hand, the goal for them is to satisfy the global standard of adequate housing, restricting mud blocks, thatched roofs, and roofs of bare wood. On the other hand, the government regards important to preserve historical buildings. You can see the photo of the palace with thatched structure was reconstructed. Third, Northern academia examines from the point of social and environmental justice. The local knowledge and skills of building should be respected for them. Fourth, local designers and builders have mind of developmentalism. Modern, durable materials of industrial production, maintenance-free, and efficient construction methods are welcomed. Such roofs have been replaced, you can see in this photo, by modern roofs, for example. Fifth, finally, local people. Local people's voice usually is weak, and it is very hard to hear it. Generally, they seek for better life, of course, but they resist when development projects alter their lifestyles. Architects should take into consideration all voices, multiple clients. Two difficult challenges. We have faced 2 difficult challenges. The first one is how to hear the hidden voice of local people. And the second one is how we can share the common good among all. On the other hand, architects are difficult to be neutral to all clients. They are architects, providers of the service, but also clients of the third group. It means Northern academia. They are usually skeptical on developmentalism, eager for the alternative socio-environmental aesthetics beyond the West. Through participation process of the local people, architects explore the physical design in which the common good can be materialized in non-profit projects for people of the Global South by the architects, designers of the Global North. The classic relation architect-client is an illusion, quite disputable. Then, what is the relation between architects' clients, beyond architects' clients, or architects providers, architects users, or clients providers? GNM practice is the key word in this section. I'll explain later about it. Let me introduce here the Japanese case. Rebuilding community after the great earthquake of 2011. Tsunami has devastated the coastal area, and a nuclear disaster has occurred in Fukushima. After this event of 2011, many designers, architects, and planners have been engaged in recovery and reconstruction of the reconstruction projects. People affected by disasters should be definitely the beneficiaries of those projects, but they are not clients for architects or planners in the economic sense. The architect's priority in designing has changed radically. Japan was not an advanced country in social design or community design before 2011. I have to say that. Architects have turned responsible for the common good and the social justice of their works. But can we say responsible? They are accountable for what they planned or designed, but not responsible for them, says Akiko, a scholar practitioner with projects in Fukushima after the nuclear accident. For instance, planners proposed a future relocation town affected by tsunami or by nuclear disaster. They can explain why they decided the size of the town with scientific evidence. According to the intention inquiry of the residents, 80% of them had the will to come back after recovery. The future city has designed based on this inquiry. They have organized workshops with local people very carefully. And they gave shape to the relocated new town. They materialized new community center. This is the community center. But the half of the residents didn't return to their hometown after living 10 years in another city. What is now required to the designers and planners is to respond continuously to the changing reality. This is the responsibility, according to Spivak. This is the ability of response. That means responsibility, and not to justify that they are not responsible for the unpredicted happenings. Formally, I said that we are going to introduce the concept of jinen practice. It is Japanese jinen. Jinen practice is a concept that Kubota introduced for overcoming the limitation of conventional modern urban planning. Jinen practice is different from practice as the implementation of a theory. There is no theory, only self-helping practice. We write jinen as like this in Japanese, or maybe in China, or in Chinese also. Jinen can be read in two ways, shizen or jinen. Each has different meaning. First, shizen. Shizen means natural in dichotomy of artificial. Natural nature in Western notion. It means not nature in Western notion. On the other hand, we can read jinen also. Jinen is a Buddhist term. Self-helping practices of actors is a self-helping practices of actors. The actors can be humans, but also nature itself. When people are affected by some disaster like 2011 great earthquake, individuals and communities respond somehow. Those responses are jinen. Even in difficult circumstances caused by nuclear disaster, jinen practices towards betterment of their lives are present. They practice in jinen way, even though there is no scientific information, even though there is no plan for reconstruction. Professional practitioners are expected to respond and support directly to those jinen practices of the local people immediately, but they are struggling how to cope with jinen practice of local people. Sometimes the intervention of professionals is against jinen practice of local people. For example, Chamanga, Ecuador, affected by earthquake in 2016. And after earthquake, I'll explain the process of after earthquake. Chamanga is a fisherman village. Atsuki, a student of mine, did interesting research about the daily practice of local people after earthquake. He found that Berbers are very interesting and very tough. When the temporary tent village was erected here, around here, Berbers moved their shop hats like this in front of it here. when the new district of housing, Nueva Ciudadela, were built, Berbers moved it again to here. Although the seaside area was severely damaged, caused by liquefaction of the soil, they didn't give up fishing. Those are GNM practice of local people. New housings were provided publicly in Nueva Ciudadela, but if you want to afford it, you should pledge that you renounce your former house at the seaside. That means that government housing policy against GNM practice of local people. This is another case in Sri Lanka. The relocation houses were provided for people affected by tsunami in 2004 in less risky zone. But several years after, they were almost abandoned. People moved back to their original village in the seaside. This is the self-help settlement in mangroves in Turbo in Colombia. People are always practicing in the way of GNM. That means living, no matter if the community designed by professional practitioners is good or bad, or the physical plan is available or not. On the other hand, professional practitioners don't have tools for GNM practice. The professional knowledge of architecture, urban planning, or community building, community design, or machizukuri, what we call in Japan, don't serve for GNM practice. That is a problem that we have. When we face to respond, when we face and try to respond to GNM practice of local people, we should tackle the question that we have already raised. Who is the client, or who are the clients? What is the professional knowledge of architecture, urban planning that serve for GNM practice? What are the tools of practice? Ivan Illich's masterpiece book, Tools for Conviviality, maybe all of you know well, would help us. In the modern industrialized society, technologies are managed by professionals normally. They are tools for professionals. Technologies are tools for professionals. The industry produces mass commercial products, and mass commercial products did invent customers, clients. On the other hand, in the economic sense. On the other hand, in a convivial society, technologies, according to Illich, serve interrelated individuals, amateurs, not professionals. Technologies can be convivial tools. Now it is not, but can be convivial tools. Illich observed the so-called shanty towns, and he said, people of shanty towns or slums, favelas, barriadas, or poblaciones in Latin America have the ability to shape their own environment, but the government, instead of supporting it, stamps the self-built home shanty. The law establishes this definition by refusing a build permit to people who cannot submit a plan signed by architect, formally registered. People are deprived of spending their own power and time to build their own homes. And also they are deprived of the opportunity to learn while building. In shanty towns, slums, or informal areas, self-building of homes or design build are everyday practices, normal practices, convivial works. Of course, we have to admit that shanty towns should not be idealized. But we must admit that till now, new knowledges and technologies have weakened our ability of shaping our own environment, our design build willing of everybody for betterment of lives. It means that we are losing the ability to survive. those knowledges and technologies can serve to strengthen instead of to weaken, can serve to strengthen our natural design build ability for the future much better. Knowledges and technologies can be convivial tools. It is to believe in the power of genuine, self-shaped, naturally emerged practice. In a convivial society, we aren't anymore designers near clients. The distinction between the designer and the client, the provider and the user will disappear. The distinction won't exist anymore. Rather, we can say that designers, builders, and clients are switching constantly during the design build process. In that sense, platform capitalism is going ahead. Platform capitalism, represented by GAFA, has already cultivated the world that works without fixed role, such as provider and user. On the other hand, platform capitalism revealed the limitation of capitalism itself. Then, overcoming capitalism, Nathan Schneider proposed the idea of the platform cooperativism. It is the title of today's presentation, in the post-capitalistic world. Our attempts of design for the common good matches this emerging platform cooperativism. It is sometimes called the gross communism, for example, by Kohei Saito, or communitarian form of capitalism. But anyway, those kind of post-capitalistic world matches quite well with design for common goods. Our design for common goods, design for the common good, the network of networks will be one of the relevant platforms of platform cooperativism, a platform for design, our environment of spaces. It means naturally for the common good. From now, we're going to learn 5 projects. I hope my intervention will stimulate further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your contribution. We have time for a few questions, if that's okay. Are you happy to take a few questions if there are any? Great, thank you. Did we have any in the Q&A? Any questions? No. Okay. So I will just kick off with a question. Can I ask you, Akiko, have you got any advice for us on how best to listen to the hidden voice of local people, as you phrased it?
The hidden voice of local people. Normally what it is done, and maybe you have experience about that, is a participatory approach. And of course, it's quite difficult, but I think it's one of the best way to know their voices. But furthermore, what I advise to my students, because I'm running some education programs of this type, what I ask to them is to live there, live in the field. Sometimes it's quite difficult, but in the case of some field activities that I have in Japan, students are living, and also sometimes I live with them. And also in informal areas, living with them, you can learn more. And it doesn't mean that you have to be local people. You are strangers, but you live there.
Thank you so much. And just to remind everyone that if you have a question for Akiko, you can put it in the Q&A by hovering over the Q&A button. So please go ahead and ask any questions that you would like to ask.
May I? Yeah, thank you, Akiko. I have a question related to the platform cooperativism, related to the local users. So we are now in the moment setting up this platform, and in the moment we are struggling in getting the voices on the platform, because I think there is a big hurdle to use technology for the different clients. As you said, do you have an advice how we could get the local users on a in the moment English speaking platform?
In the sorry, the platform.
Yes. So because the design for the common good exchange, as you mentioned lastly, it could be like a platform used for cooperativism, but that means that all client levels should be able to get connected and to be present there. And I'm not so sure if this would really work, or how this could work.
The conversation is quite important in the platform, and to know each other and to learn each other, different clients. But more than conversation, working together with our own hands, it's quite useful to know each other. And it is not necessary to meet in a table, all around the table, and to have a conversation. It is possible. There are different ways of participation to this platform, and especially I give importance to work together, to build something together, because some stakeholders, they have difficulties to express using the language.
Yes.
But if they work together, we can understand each other.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I mean, Akiko, you'll be with us through the session, so I'm sure that we can develop these ideas, you know, with the benefit of also the other presentations as well. So thank you very much for that fascinating presentation. So I'm going to move us on to the first block of 3 project presentations. We've got so they're in 15-minute blocks, and we're hoping that we'd have maybe 5 minutes question after each presentation. So that would give the speakers 10 minutes to speak. I'll just let the speakers know when we're sort of 10 minutes in, and hope that that doesn't distract you too much. And can I just ask the presenters to keep to time? That would be really helpful. So hopefully the presenters are all raring to go and ready. We're starting off with the first project, which is the GER Innovation Hub. And I'm just going to very quickly introduce you to 3 of the presenters of that project. So we have Badrun Gardi, who's co-founder and chair of the GER Hub, a non-profit social innovation firm in Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. Joshua Bolchover, who's an associate professor at the University of Hong Kong and co-founder of the Rural Urban Framework, and Jersey Poon, who's an architect at Rural Urban Framework and an assistant lecturer at the University of Hong Kong. So we're going to hand over to you now, so feel free to share your screen and begin your presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're joined, myself, Jersey, and Badrun, who's just flown into Mongolia. So thanks for having us. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get stuck in straight away. Okay. As we're in Hong Kong, we're all working from home at the moment. It's quite a dicey situation, as some of you might have guessed. Can you all see my screen? Yeah. Screen working?
We can see your screen.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So here we are in Mongolia, in Ulaanbaatar, and here you see the traditional Mongolian dwelling, or the ger. It's perfect for the demands of nomadic life. In fact, it's been designed for portability, and all of its component parts are prefabricated and can be bought at everyday markets. However, these qualities, which make it an ideal dwelling for a nomadic situation, have contributed to a rapid urbanization process in the city of Ulaanbaatar, which has created sprawling districts with no basic infrastructure that nevertheless house 840,000 residents. And when people move to the city, they're faced with a whole series of different new challenges that they didn't experience whilst living in the countryside. Urban life is completely different from nomadic life. In the city, they now live with strangers, with people outside of their own kinship network. They have to collect and pay for water, making 8 trips a day to these water kiosks to collect drinking water and water for washing. 95% of the population use these simple pit latrines, just the holes in the ground, which contribute to toxic soil contamination. And during the extreme cold, as many of you know, Ulaanbaatar is the coldest capital in the world, with temperatures reaching -40 during the winter. And during these extremely cold winters, each household burns coal and coke briquettes to stay warm. Each household burns, on estimation, around 4 tons on average of these briquettes and coal each winter, which leads to air pollution levels which are some of the worst in the world. But this kind of form of urbanization, this form of development, has also left the civic infrastructure that has been left out. These districts really lack forms of community infrastructure. There are no places to collectively meet, and there's a dire shortage of childcare facilities. Only 50% of the children between the ages of 2 and 5 will actually get a kindergarten place. So in a culture where the word community is not part of the language, how can one enable a space to build their community? Now, this project didn't start with a client. It didn't start with a budget. It didn't start with us knowing what we wanted to do. This started with a conversation. It started with a conversation, that conversation between myself, Badran, Jersey, Uri, many others, started in 2014 when we first moved to Ulaanbaatar, or when we first traveled to Ulaanbaatar to start our research. And that conversation was really fundamental in how we started to think about the GER districts and how we thought we might be able to intervene. And in a way, the project was less about the building, but actually about the process of making architecture. And in that way, we saw design and making architecture a kind of fundamentally a kind of collective action. And through this making process, through the enabling of the building, we were able to begin that initiation of the construction of a community. So it started, there were many stages, many pieces of this puzzle. We initiated working with Badran and the NGO GERHUB, doing engagement sessions with residents, trying to figure out what it is that they wanted, what were their concerns. This was back in 2015. But then finding a very specific community partner, a guy called Oggarel, had already started building upon his idea of creating an eco-town in one of the districts, Sagina Kakhan 43. And in a way, we were trying to dovetail with his efforts, to harness what he'd already done, and then build upon that in order to initiate this new idea, this new concept of a type of new kind of community infrastructure. And we took on board what we were doing in Hong Kong U. We have a design build program that we initiated. We got money from the Jockey Club and we brought students from Hong Kong U over to Ulaanbaatar to start the build, to start the construction and the first phase of the development of the wood construction of the structural frame. And so they worked with carpenters, with local builders. They took the pieces onto site and they assembled together with members of the community, raising the structure almost like a kind of barn building exercise together to raise the structure in place over one summer. And after doing that, that of course was just one piece. We had the structure in place, but that was really, again, not the end of the project. We had to, Oggarel set up these community landscape workshops even when the project wasn't finished. We had to find a way to get more funding. The funding hadn't finished. The building, the structure was up, but the rest of it hadn't. So we initiated a new wave of fundraising through some community actions, but also here's Badran on site, bringing people to show them what we had and get them to raise that last third of money that we needed to complete the project. And then when we finished in 2020, we managed to firstly open, get people into the building. We brought students back who built the project to see what they'd done and also kind of reconnect with the people from those neighborhoods. And we started again, trying to find out what this space could enable through it now coming into existence. And Badran's going to talk more now about the types of initiatives that his operation, GERHUB, have been doing since the center has been opened. Of course, with COVID, it's been extremely difficult, but they've been managed to find some very intriguing methods to start thinking about this kind of community engagement and what that means for these GER districts. So over to you, Badran, for some insights on how you're utilizing the space.
And Thank you, Josh.
Just before you begin, just to let you know, you've got about 6 minutes left, and which you may want to use some of that for questions. But so 6 minutes left. Thank you.
Sure, I'll go very quickly. Just by the way, Josh, there's this gray block on the right-hand side. Not sure if you can move. Okay, that's better. Yep. So I'll talk very briefly about who are the current users, what's been happening, and what the future plan is. There's that gray block right now in the middle of the photo. Basically, the GIH is located in an area where Sunganhairkhan district, which is one of the largest gear districts in Ulaanbaatar. It's the most rapidly growing gear district, with migrants constantly coming in from the countryside into the city. The local, we call it Hara administrative unit, has a population of about 13,000. And then this Echo Town area that we mentioned, that Josh mentioned, has about 1,500 people. And so the purpose is to really try and serve all members of the community and anyone who's willing to come and utilize the space. And our organization, we're especially fond of working with children and youth. So, our passion and interest is in trying to run educational workshops for children and youth as well. Next slide, please. The space itself is, so our organization, our nonprofit Gear Hub manages the space, but we do also have a community member that's from the neighborhood that we've hired, who manages the space on a day-to-day level. And we wanted to make sure that the people that we identify and work with there in the space are those who have very distinct local knowledge and have built trust with community members, have existing relationships with community members as well. Our organization, we work more widely throughout the city of Ulaanbaatar in various gear districts, but the Gear Innovation Hub is obviously a very important part of what we are doing, because it is our first sort of physical space that we are managing in the gear district. Here are just some quick slides of photos of things that have taken place in the Gear Innovation Hub. Unfortunately, the timing just so happened that, it was, Josh mentioned it finished in 2020. And then, Mongolia had very strict COVID restrictions. It has been especially bad for children with, the schools being closed for basically 2 full academic years. So we've had to really sort of limit what we have been able to do publicly. And I think we're just coming to a point now where Mongolia has lifted all restrictions, and so it's an opportunity for us to really ramp up activities. Next slide. During COVID, when we couldn't actually have physical gatherings, so one of the main things that we try to do is utilize technology, utilize social media, and have a Facebook group, for example, on the left-hand side here that has, as you can see, about 1,000 members, members from the community, to run activities with them digitally, to run competitions, to see, to gather ideas on people who've built, self-built sort of installation for their housing, low-cost installation. So we're just, doing basically what we can to keep people engaged during this period of crackdown. Next slide. We work here, you can see an activity design studio that we involved local administration folks from the Horo, as well as local university students. So our main, one of the main things that we do as Gear Hub is we have a strong belief in a partnership model. So all of our activities basically are in partnership with other institutions, organizations, individuals. We work with, international organizations and universities, and people like Josh in Jersey, but also, local residents, local administration folks, local university students, and just try to bring together all sorts of different stakeholders to the table so that we can start to address this massive challenge that we have, working on issues in the gear districts. Next slide. Here, I just wanted to sort of go back to what Josh mentioned earlier, which is that, we don't have a word for community, which is a really key thing. What we want to make sure that we do with the Gear Innovation Hub is that it's an opportunity, a space for people to gather to form relationships. In the Mongolian language, we don't have this word for community because traditionally we're nomadic herders. We don't have prior experience. Prior to maybe 100 years ago, really, there's no experience living in a sedentary manner amongst a large number of people. And so for a vast majority of folks, they're only living in the city for the last 10, 20 years. And as such, the sense of community can be quite low. And so we hope that the space is an opportunity for people to gather and start to really talk about community issues and cooperate on community issues in a very sort of pragmatic and practical manner. And I love.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we've run over for time. So if you just want to sort of finish with your last sentence, that and I'm afraid
Sure.
we wouldn't have time for questions after this, but there will be questions in the general discussion period afterwards. Okay.
Sure, I apologize. I just, what Professor OKABE talked about, Jinen practice, I love that. And we really hope to provide this space as an opportunity for community members to practice Jinen. And so that there can be grassroots level activities that sprung, out naturally from relationships being built in the Gear Innovation Hub. So I'll just finish with that.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to go on to our second project, which is the Fish River Rangers Accommodations. And sorry, I should have said before I went on, if anyone had questions for that previous project, then there is time to ask those questions in the general discussion that we'll have after the first block of 3 projects. So we're going to move on to the Fish River Rangers Accommodation in Australia. We've got 2 presenters, David Morris, who's an architect and builder and the founding director of the Student Design Construct programme at the University of South Australia, and Jyoti Fayers-Kochlan, who leads the Design Construct programme at the university, which is for the design and construction of rail projects in remote locations. So I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you for the opportunity. I'll start with a video which gives you an overview of the project.
The following presentation supports the University of South Australia's Design Construct entry into the 2019 Australian Institute of Architecture National Awards for the Fish River Ranger Accommodation in the Northern Territory. The Design Construct program at the University of South Australia has had a long track record over 20 years, engaging students of architecture, design and engineering in remote Indigenous community projects in Australia and more recently overseas. On the strength of this experience, the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation, ILSC, invited the Design Construct program to propose improvements for Aboriginal ranger accommodation at the former Fish River Station, 300 kilometres south of Darwin. Rangers employed under the Australian Government's Working on Country program were accommodated in open fabric tent structures which did not adequately protect against sun, tropical downpours and insects, nor did they provide culturally important visual separation between genders or privacy between occupants. Rangers slept on the floor on inflatable or foam mattresses in individual insect enclosures with no storage for personal effects and no individual lighting. The expedient option for agencies like the ILSC is to install air-conditioned transportables on site. However, the ILSC were aware that while the upfront cost of transportables was attractive, the cost of transport to such a remote location, combined with the cost of installation and services, air conditioning equipment, augmented solar power, and ongoing maintenance requirements, amounted to a very considerable cost. In an effort to explore options and evaluate the greatest cost benefit, including cultural and environmental benefits, Master of Architecture students were invited to explore designs for upgrading the existing tent structures compared to the cost of transportable configurations. From previous design construct experience working in tropical Vanuatu, the strategy of employing large roofs and creating multi-directional cross-ventilation has proven to be an effective design strategy against heat, rain and humidity. In addition, by drawing upon vernacular architecture of the South Pacific more generally, where the gable roofs have substantially extended prows, the opportunity for extending the roof coverage of the existing accommodation at Fish River would achieve substantially greater protection from sun and rain, as well as visual separation between men's and women's accommodation. To achieve this, the fabric roof was to be removed and the existing frame extended with prefabricated hollow section rafters and braces bolted to the existing framework, in combination with large prow beams to support the extended ridge beams, which created a much greater roof coverage than the former fabric roof. A major aim was to provide better insulated roofing compared with the fabric roofing. The design strategy for achieving this was to use spanform roofing with a zinc aluminum finish to provide a high level of solar reflection. The structural elements for supporting and separating the roof skin and the plywood ceiling linings were Z purlins, which had the advantage of being lightweight on a remote site where there were no cranes, which could be transported in relatively short 6-metre lengths, but achieve the required structural continuity over long spans. The uninterrupted longitudinal space between the purlins achieved effective roof venting required in hot tropical climates. In order to maximise natural cross ventilation and achieve effective insect screening, floor-to-ceiling screen walls and doors would be required, which was sufficiently robust for large unframed spans and resistant to denting and ripping. This problem was solved by using crimp-safe stainless steel mesh panels and doors. The proposal to use mesh as an entire system of secure enclosure to achieve maximum cross-ventilation and insect protection was made possible due to the extensive roof coverage. In addition to the large insulated roof and screen walls, the Fish River accommodation upgrade addressed the need for private sleeping spaces and personal storage, lighting and comfort by providing prefabricated interlocking plywood cabinet work to construct individual private raised beds with personal storage space, including shelves, hanging space and secure locker space, with ceilings above each bed and personal lighting, all resulting in a significant improvement of individual amenity and privacy. Students and staff in the Design Construct program first visited Fish River to consult with the rangers and to survey the site and buildings in July 2016. Initial design proposals for ranger accommodation were further developed in detail in a Master of Architecture studio where cost estimates for upgrading the existing accommodation compared favourably with the cost of transportable accommodation, particularly when the cultural and environmental benefits were included. On the basis of these estimates, a contract was signed between the ILSC and the Design Construct program in early 2018, and the students began the prefabrication of rafter extensions, roof framing and cabinet work in the Design Construct fabrication facility in Adelaide. Prefabricated components as well as roof sheeting, insulation, ceiling and floor ply, flashings, fixings and tools were all packed into a 6-metre container which was railed up to Adelaide River and then trucked to Fish River. In July 2018, 30 students and staff travelled in university buses 3,030 kilometres from Adelaide to Fish River and set up camp. Construction continued over 10 days, with only one afternoon break mid-construction, which was evidence of the extraordinary effort and commitment of the students. Upon completion of the 2 accommodation buildings known as Bullaballas, the rangers enthusiastically moved in, and the students returned to Adelaide. Following the completion of the Fish River project, the Design Construct program successfully secured internal research funding to monitor the thermal performance of the upgraded accommodation. This research and post-occupancy interviews with rangers is scheduled for completion later in 2019. In conclusion, anecdotal feedback from the ILSC and other visitors to Fish River report that the rangers are delighted with their new accommodation and the improved levels of comfort, amenity and privacy.
Thank you. That
The
was.
following presentation supports the University of South Australia's Design and Construct entry.
So I think I'd like to just follow up that that presentation with some, I guess, an update on where the project is now. That was 2018 that we completed the work, and the rangers moved in shortly after that. And I guess this goes back also to the question of who the client is, and who the client was then and who the client is now, and how that might change over time and how that might change the needs of the project. David, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything, but the conversation we recently had with the client asked how the accommodation was being used. And you could see from the video that we built 2 balabalas. One of them for the women was left open without any internal joinery. The second one for the men was set up with a division internally to create 4 sleeping quarters. At the time, that was what the rangers who we spoke with preferred, after looking at many different options. And we installed it that way. And the rangers who were there at the time moved in and were very happy with the situation. It turns out that the next lot of rangers that moved in the following season weren't using the accommodation and were sleeping outside. And when the manager asked why, they said they didn't want to be separated and they prefer to sleep together in the same space. So subsequently, that joinery unit, which created the storage and the separation that the previous rangers wanted, was removed to create an open plan space like the women's accommodation. So now the rangers are in there sleeping together on the floor as one group. So I guess that sort of highlights the ongoing issue of adaptability and what the client's needs are at a particular time and how that might change in the future.
If I can just add to Jyoti's comments, one of the, first of all, I have to congratulate all of the projects that are working from the bottom up and working through participation with communities. In Australia, the relationship with the Indigenous people is made more difficult for architects and builders like ourselves because it's largely controlled by the government. And in many ways, the top-down influence on Aboriginal outcomes in communities is already predetermined, and it's very much a continuation of the colonial past. However, there are organisations like the ISLC who are very keen on engaging communities at the ground level and to invite help and assistance from organisations like us. So, but if we could work with a more empowered community, we would be working from the bottom up and engaging with the communities much more closely than often we can.
Thank you both very much. You have about 4 minutes left and we could either hand it over for questions or if there's anything more you wanted to say, then please feel free to do that. What would you prefer? Would you have you
happy for questions?
Great, thank you very much. So people can put their questions in the Q&A, or we can start off with some questions. Is it okay if I start off with the very basic question? They're rangers. Does that mean you mentioned government involvement? Does that mean they're rangers employed by the government to do that job? Is that correct?
The Australian government, through the ILSC, for example, has put aside a large amount of money which is invested, and the income from that investment is principally used to buy back traditional land from landholders, and then to employ Aboriginal rangers, often traditional owners, to manage that land. So that's where we were assisting in improving the accommodation for those rangers employed by or through this scheme.
Thank you. So yeah, that helps, because that helps explain how it's quite there's a level of complexity to that relationship. Therefore, you're talking about top down, ground up.
I think.
Sorry,
Jane. I'll add to that too. The part of the motive of the project is to accommodate the rangers who are working on the land. The other motive is also to provide accommodation on the land for traditional owners who live nearby in a town, but don't actually get to stay in accommodation on their country. So the women's accommodation, for example, is a place where women can come from the town in groups of up to 10 or 12 and stay in secure accommodation and spend time on country, spend time with landscaping, with bringing people back to country and passing on their history of the land and how they lived on the land to younger generations. So there's also that aspect of giving people the opportunity to get back to country who have lost that connection because of being moved to towns or settlements.
Thank you. We're close to time, but if we've not got anything in the Q&A at the moment, I don't think. So if it's okay with you that we're so close to time, I think we'll pause that conversation there and stack it up and conclude it in the general discussion at the end. So thank you both very much. That was a really fascinating presentation, an amazing project. Thank you. So I'm going to take us over to the third project, so the final one in this block, which is called Imagine Castlegate. And I'm just going to introduce the presenters. Carolyn Butterworth is a senior university teacher at the University of Sheffield School of Architecture in the UK. She's the director of Live Works, which is the School of Architecture's High Street Urban Room and Project Office. And also introducing Thomas Moore. Tom's a PhD candidate at Sheffield School of Architecture, and his work with LiveWorks contributes to his practice-based research. So I'm going to hand over to Carolyn and Tom now, if you're ready to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here, and thank you for the invitation to share this project with you. Tom's going to start by sharing a film, and then I'm going to show you a few more slides to give you a bit more detail about the project. So over to Tom.
Okay. Yeah.
Castlegate is in some ways a part of the city centre that's lost its role. And in order to re-establish that new role, we need to make it into a distinctive place again. And so the story of the place is a really important ingredient.
In 2014, Sheffield's markets were demolished, leaving behind a material and social void in the centre of the city. But this revealed the site of Sheffield's castle for the first time in more than a century, kick-starting a process of civic engagement with the city's heritage and stories via groups such as the Friends of Sheffield Castle.
We worked with the Friends on a project called Revealing the Castle, which was to capture a vision of incremental development, to really start with what was there, not to just think of it as a blank slate that you just then put something on top of, but you actually start to reveal and sort of build forward from that point. And so the idea was to, over time, activate the site through festivals and markets and creative activities.
Gradually bring it back to life.
And in 2017, new stories began to be told on the site as cultural innovators began to move into the peripheries of Castlegate, getting people back into the area and prototyping new activities for its future. From championing marginalised musicians, supporting creative ex-offenders and instilling a DIY ethic to Sheffield's music scene.
after the market was ripped out, it's literally been left to just on its own, right? You know, and there's discount stores and betting shops.
I think there's like quite a slow shift towards this not feeling like not a nice place to be, and I think that, you know, activity in the street like skateboarding, for instance, or, you know, gigs happening in the evening, or, you know, just generally when all three places on this street are open, like there's a real like buzz to it. Like,
but I guess the risk was, you know, like just putting a lot of time and effort and investment into a project that you think it's privately owned, and it's in an area of town that is earmarked for development, and you just don't know how fast that's.
Although we're lucky enough to have had this space and had those conversations and been in sort of a street where there's like exciting stuff happening, how many more people aren't even able to find that space in the first place?
It's about allowing that space to exist for people that can deliver creatively, you know, because young people are fluid, right? So you're kind of coming to the table, you're doing all the kind of, you know, the background and the theory behind it all, which is great. But then actually, you know, what happens is you start breaking things and you start thinking, well, why can't we do it? And that's where the best things happen, right? So having that synergy with the university is so important, because actually it kind of lends itself well with what we do here. There's a long-term vision. There's an educated approach to what you're doing. The fact that you're sat here talking to us, you know, you're talking to all different pies, irrespective of what they are, how much they've got in the bank, or, you know, it's a totally creative process that you're doing. It's you know, so
Okay, I'll pass back over to Carolyn, who's going to run the presentation.
You're muted, Carolyn.
Apologies. Okay, hopefully you can hear me now. So I'm going to give you a bit more information about the Imagine Castlegate project. Hopefully you can see the screen. I'm going to tell you a bit more about how we've been working with local people, community groups, civic stakeholders to reveal stories, make connections between them, and to, from out of those connections, build visions. Castlegate is the birthplace of Sheffield. It's home to the buried remains of Sheffield Castle, as you've heard. It's also home to 800 years of markets. The site is now really struggling. Businesses are closing, and the future is really uncertain for the area. It's still very much part of the city centre, and people really are very invested in this place. For many centuries, it's been a meeting place. It's where people from all over Sheffield have come to see who they're sharing the city with. And that social melting pot is incredibly important to the city at large. At the heart of Castlegate, there's a large development site. This is where the Sheffield Castle was before it was demolished, where the castle markets were before they were demolished. So what we're doing is we're working very closely with local stakeholders to ask questions about the future of that site and of Castlegate more widely. We've been working with a large number of groups, community interest groups who have formed around the future of Castlegate, creative practitioners who started to inhabit meanwhile spaces in the area, and civic institutions who are making policy decisions around the future of the area. And of course, local people, they don't have a logo, but they're in here as well as part of the conversation. And we've been trying to develop a co-production process around the future of the area, specifically, as I said, around the castle site. And we see our role as mediator between all of these different groups and individuals. What we're trying to do constantly is push the project up the ladder of participation, away and above the traditional model of consultation that would normally roll out in this sort of regeneration project, to start to embed authentic partnership across the board as much as we possibly can, to advocate for voices which are normally marginalised within this development process, and also to act as a champion for sustainable, inclusive design of whatever is delivered on site. And we've done this in lots of different ways. We've been working on site with our students, with our local partners since 2014. We've been doing it through events and festivals on the ground, on site. We're continually, it's our city, we're a campus university in the city centre, so we're on the ground as much as we possibly can be. Engaging people on the street. We've been working with our students to develop speculative projects over the years, communicating really ambitious ideas around what the future of Castlegate could be, just to sort of raise aspirations and to ask what if in many different ways, using lots of different tools and mechanisms, drawings, models, installations, virtual reality installations here. We've also been using our research expertise to reveal the hidden stories of the buildings and the spaces and the histories of Castlegate, just to sort of talk about the richness of the area so that people don't just dwell on its current malaise, but actually start to understand that it's a very rich place in terms of its heritage and its social history. We've contributed to a new book about Sheffield Castle, and our students' vision for the future of the site has been included in an archaeology publication, which is quite unusual perhaps. And we've worked with our colleagues in computer studies, archaeology, and also industry partners in the city to generate a new digital model of Sheffield Castle and to reveal the history of the castle. Many people don't know about the castle, surprisingly, in Sheffield, and we've used augmented reality in a public exhibition around that to sort of reveal these stories, to engage people in the site, and then to sort of switch the conversation about what if. So, you know, what could the future of this place be if it had such a imposing, grand history? And then we've been actually cultivating and developing visions with our particular community partners. So the Friends of Sheffield Castle have worked with us to develop a vision for the site, and they've adopted that within their master plan, within their blueprint, which has since then been adopted by the City Council as something that they support and they would like to see delivered. And also working with a music academy who works with deprived young people and children in the city to actually take on a heritage building, an old Victorian building in Castlegate, and to create that into a state-of-the-art performance venue for young children and young people in the city. And with this vision that the students created, Harmony Works have now actually got funding to purchase the building and to kickstart that project, which is fantastic. We're now embarking on the next round of public engagement and stakeholder workshops with the council. The council now has got national government money to invest in the site at last. After 7 years, things are starting to happen. And we're going to continue to work with our local partners to do all we can to make sure those marginalised voices, those people on the ground who are already doing creative DIY, extraordinary things, innovative things on the ground, how their voices can still be heard within this regeneration process. And we still, as a School of Architecture, are committed to advocate for inclusive and transparent and meaningful co-production as we go forward. 7 years on, we've still got probably lots more to do. It might carry on for another 7 years, who knows, but I think we're in here for the long haul. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, both of you. We've got a little bit of time for questions if anybody would like to ask anything. One of the, we've got a comment in the chat just about the practicalities of asking questions. So if you're an audience member, you can't unmute yourself, but we can unmute you if you raise your hand, or you can put a question in the Q&A which is another way of asking a question. So you've got two ways of participating in the conversation. Raise your hand or put something in the Q&A.
I would have a question as architecture educator about the role you see for architects or for architecture education at the school. So which is the key competencies an architect has to have being an architect, because I think you're expanding the field, you're making it very, very open. What do you think about that?
Thanks, Ursula. I think that's quite right. I think we are trying to expand the role and the extent of practice that we approach within architectural education, and that we see practitioners starting to inhabit. We call a lot of our work pre-project. Actually, it's not necessarily projects that are actually ready to be commissioned, have a brief. You know, we work with a lot of grassroots organisations who are still forming. You know, they haven't necessarily, they might have a dream, they might have a vision, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to begin to put a project together, let alone commission an architect and deliver it on the ground. So I think a lot of the work that we're doing with our students is how do you actually work with local people to map capacities, knowledges, resources, so that you can actually start to cultivate projects and evolve projects together out of that understanding. And be very responsive to that, be very agile around that, and understand your sort of resources that you could bring to that. And I think through Castlegate, we've had the opportunity to bring lots of different sorts of resources when they're needed at different moments to sort of be responsive along the way. So it's that sort of agility and that listening, I suppose, and learning on the ground, which is really important to us.
I would like to continue this conversation maybe in the later discussion, because it's I'm really curious. But there was a question in the chat. I don't know if I was
from Orit Sarfati. Is anybody able to allow Orit to ask?
Yes, I would like to. Zum Diskussionsteilnehmer befördern. Sprecherlaubnis. So you could speak up now. Orit,
would you? Are you happy to just ask your question straight out? You should be able to speak now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Orit.
I'm sorry, my microphone is not great. That I thought the chat would be easier. But, I mean, all the work that I've seen so far has been really inspiring and fantastic. So thank you very much. I just wondered, again, I guess more overseas. We all kind of seems to strive towards kind of a positive change. And I wonder if we ever try to use kind of a negative approach as a way to stress the urgency for a positive change. I mean, as things can escalate quite quickly and become, I don't know, private development or things that we kind of try to avoid and keep in the realm of the public. So I wonder if that's something, Caroline, you ever discuss or even do as a project in your side.
Thank you, Orit.
Sorry, go ahead, Caroline.
Sorry, Jane. Yeah, thank you so much, Orit. I think that's an incredibly interesting and important question, because it's, you know, as a School of Architecture, I think we can engage in lots of different sorts of speculation. And you know, quite often students are interested in proposing or communicating sort of dystopian, you know, trajectories perhaps that they could see unfolding. I think we do talk a lot about that. We talk about the power of hope and the sort of the importance of merging anger with hope in a way to sort of cultivate a sort of sense of urgency around this sort of mode of speculation. I mean, I was struck by something I read by Rebecca Solnit quite recently, and she said, we don't have the luxury of being dystopian anymore. We work from a position of privilege. You know, we do have the capacity to propose better futures. And actually, I'm not so sure anymore that dystopian futures really bring people together. I think they might actually more often than not just seed despair. And actually what we have to now do is try and cultivate hope from our position of privilege, where we do have these resources and we do have this capacity to work with people in this way. But other people might feel differently, I don't know.
It's interesting in our city in Sheffield, we've kind of got a lot of development happening simultaneously. It's almost if, developments happening in some parts of the city almost act as some way as a dystopia to what the kind of worst possible scenario of what Castlegate could be, which is a very kind of financialized model, which is in some ways an outdated model of producing kind of large span retail space in an age where retail is kind of rapidly dying. So these kind of conflicts and dialogues are kind of continuously being performed, live in the city, and we're constantly kind of in dialogue with them as a way of kind of adding criticism to the project as well.
Thank you so much, Tom. I think that we've kind of seamlessly moved into the general discussion phase now anyway. So thank you to Carolyn and Tom for their presentation. I think we can just continue this in an open discussion with questions for any of for Akiko as keynote, or for any of the project presenters. We're getting a few questions coming through on the chat now. Ursula, was there anything you wanted to say just to sort of guide people through this next part of the session?
We already did, so it's difficult a little bit, the hand raise function, because I don't see the audience, but if you post something in the chat and I would unmute you, you could post your questions. For example, there is Simon Colwell who put a question in the chat. Simon, would you please be unmuted?
Yes, and also just to say that for the people that weren't able to join on Zoom, we've got the live stream on YouTube. And Rohini, if you could feed through any comments that have come through to you on the YouTube live stream as well, that would be really helpful. So sorry, back over to Simon.
No, it was not Simon, it was CS, it was Carolyn. No, it was Simon. It was Simon. So Simon, I unmute you. You could talk then. How to do that?
Yeah, I've got a question for all the projects really that are academic based. How the projects themselves are accepted by university colleagues and administrations at your respective universities. Maybe for Carolyn first. The question.
Thank you, Simon. It's been an interesting few years recently, actually, because as a School of Architecture, we've been running live projects for 20 years, and a lot of that has been us just sort of, doing it because we think it's important and feeling very different from the rest of the university, I think. But in recent years, the university has sort of reconnected with its civic roots. It's very much now a civic university. It was set up as a people's university, funded by working people. So it's sort of reconnected with those roots, and I think we're now getting a lot more support, a lot more interest in what we have been doing. With that, perhaps a lot more scrutiny, a lot more sort of expectation of being able to sort of share across, and we're willing to do this. It's really interesting for us. We really want to put many more interdisciplinary projects together. We want to work with beyond our silos and with different colleagues in different disciplines across the university. But with that sort of institutional interest now becomes the sort of structures and the expectations of reporting and the sort of the criteria around what a university thinks of itself as being civic, which perhaps makes us sometimes feel a little less agile on the ground. But what it does mean is that we can actually start to broker that conversation a lot more effectively. We work generally at grassroots level, but now because the institution of the university is talking in a much more civic way to the institution of the council, we can get involved in that conversation. So swings and roundabouts, but generally quite positive, actually.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'd like to ask the same question to Akiko. How's your work accepted within the University of Tokyo and the region?
Yeah, so after this, Joshua has a question as well.
Yeah.
Akiko, please.
Thank you very much for the question. I belong to the department, a transdisciplinary department. So in the same department, we have architects and also specialists of sociology, because my department, the name of the department is Socio-Environmental Studies. So we have anthropologists.
Audio quality experience during your Zoom meeting.
So sorry,
Once
Akiko.
the test is completed, you will see the results on the screen.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
What is that?
It's okay. I think it's okay.
Cancelled it. You should be okay to speak now. I'm so sorry.
No problem. So anthropologists and also engineering of the sewage. So we learn a lot, because if we have this kind of grassroots projects, it is much easier to have a transdisciplinary discussion. So in that sense, as a graduate school, I belong to sociocultural environmental studies, and in the undergraduate course, I belong to the Department of Architecture. So the reaction is different. No? So in the Department of Architecture, now in Japan, the problem is the aging society. So, and also there are growing demands for the reconstruction after disaster. So our projects are well accepted, and in the Department of Architecture in that sense. But I enjoy much more in my Department of Sociocultural Environmental Studies with other specialists. And I have more, I feel more potential in that point.
Yeah, I think the question is really about the value the institution puts upon these types of projects. And I think for us, there was very much support in terms of doing live projects as a kind of teaching tool, the value to students. But there was a huge amount of skepticism in regard to whether this type of work was deemed academic and scholarly research. And I think that battle that we've tried to address over the last 10 years was to try and establish a culture of a lab within the institution that could actually take place, that could engage these types of design projects, but through the act of design, that new knowledge could be produced in a certain way. And I think that task, albeit with all the procedures of evaluation, is shifted a little bit towards the value of impact. And in a way, if we're able to kind of position the projects and define the projects and be able to determine that they can produce a degree of impact, then we'll be able to gain a little bit more support, I think, within the kind of research culture, or the more formal research culture of the institution.
Thank you. Is there any question from the audience? So I don't have any question in the chat in the moment. Rohini, do you have any question?
So there are two comments from the YouTube live chat. They're both from Christian Dimmer. I think his first comment was after Akiko's presentation, where he said it might be also useful to look at the local people in a more differentiated fashion. Local politicians, ethnic groups, women, men, old people, clans, castes, young people, grown-ups, and children. Jeff Howe responded to that, saying that the same thing can be said about platforms, perhaps. The next comment is from Christian Dimmer again, and this is for the GareHub project. He's written that GareHub is a beautiful example of platform. It is important to realize that often social structures exist that we want to identify, collaborate with, and link. Often we don't need to start from scratch. So these are the three comments that came in from the live stream.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Rohini. Would any of the presenters like to respond to any of those comments?
No, I think, I really enjoyed this idea of the platform. I think what's interesting, and I think, we're all in agreement that somehow architecture is about people, right? I think there's a narrative here that we can all get behind, that, architecture is about people and it's about engaging and empowering people somehow in a process. However, I think sometimes the difficulty is what agency do we actually have as architects? And I think this is kind of a key question within all of the projects, is where is that agency and how is that agency best, what do we come with as a form of expertise, right? What do we offer? It's not just about getting people in the room. If you get people in the room just because they're members of the community and you ask them what they want, they'll say, can you fix my road? Or, I don't like my neighbor's fence. That doesn't mean that we're going to do a great project. So how do you kind of go between not just engagement for engagement's sake, but create a form of agency which can create something new? Even that might be alien. We're coming from outside in many cases, but there's an importance to that, right? There's a sort of attention or an unknown that can result in a project being created. And I think sometimes we talk of engagement as this kind of super nice process and people are in the room and they're having cups of tea and drawing and it's fantastic. But really, I think we need to get to the nitty-gritty of the complexity of that problem, the difficulties of that program, and what agency and expertise can we still maintain. I'm in the industry, I want to build things. I have a formal ideas that I think are important. And if we're about creating space as well as enabling those communities, what is our form of expertise and how can we take that to the next level in a certain way?
Thank you so much. David, does anybody else want to come in on those comments there from Joshua?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I support what Joshua was talking about. I think that as educators in architecture programs, we've got to really instill an obligation in our students and therefore in architectural practice to address a lot of themes that are already part of this common good agenda, and that is to address social, cultural and environmental issues for empowering people. And I think that there's often a problem with our programs, that we serendipitously just tackle problem after problem in a studio environment without really addressing in any structured way these issues. And I might say that it also needs to go into an examination of how successful those projects are, if they're real projects, into post-occupancy evaluation. And, you get institutes of architecture, and I think it's common, but very common in Australia and I think in Britain, where people are awarded, architects are awarded for projects which haven't even been occupied. It's the object which gets the prize, not the function or the success of the project. And we need to really change that culture of designing nice houses for rich people and getting first, prizes for it.
I have a question. I have a question regarding to that. So I see that there is a difference between the professional architects, as you mentioned, building buildings which are not used, and what we are talking about, design for the common good. Related back to education. So do you think what we try to teach or develop for our students should be part of all architecture education, should be part of all architecture? This is one question, and the other question is, you all always talk about the impact, but the question is how to measure this impact. So, and where to measure the impact? Is it to measure the impact on the students' knowledge, and then which knowledge would it be? So not technical construction, but then social impact, and how to measure the impact of the projects, and do we really try to talk about our failures as well? I found it difficult. I'm working in this field since years, but I barely find people who want to talk really openly about the failures, not just about success. So any idea of how to measure impact?
Could I jump in there, Ursula, and just talk about that idea of impact and evaluation? It's definitely it's uppermost in our minds, because this is how we're being measured. It's as Joshua was saying, it's very much a current sort of metric, and usually impact is about the outcome, and it's about the follow-on impact once the project is completed. And what we're trying to do now is, every time we start a conversation, is we talk with that group, with those stakeholders, how will you measure success of this project? So we're starting to build in an idea of co-evaluation as well as co-design, as well as co-research. So as soon as we're starting to share, and there'll be different measures in the room, as soon as we're starting to honestly share what we're hoping to achieve from this project, we've then got a series of things we can sort of test the project against as we go forward. And as you're working in something as long-term as Castlegate, you could say the impact is how, what the design quality of the final regeneration might be, how inclusive it is, how locally distinctive it is and meaningful it is for people. But there's going to be an awful lot of impacts along the way, and we might never get to that point, So I think we've just got to break it down and start to understand that these impacts are happening all the time, but they have to be shared and understood collectively.
Thank you.
We have a comment from Christian Dimmer again from YouTube, from that YouTube live stream. He says, we might also want to think about what our underlying normative goals are. In short, what is participation for? To what end? For me personally, it is the means for promoting #participatory, #democracy. I think he means participatory democracy. I'll just share his comment on the chat for everyone to read.
Thank you so much. Does anybody want to come back on Christian's comment? Did anybody like to speak, either from presenters or participants in the general conversation?
May I raise another question? Carolyn, you were talking about raising expectations. It's one of the most important things of your work in the field, on the field. Going to other projects, when we go to the field, especially in a culture which is not our own, and we start to raise expectations, it might be not a good approach, because then if you raise expectations, you have to somehow fulfill them. So why do you say that raising expectations is a good means?
Sorry, Ursula, was that for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're sort of this common consensus that you have to manage expectations within participatory practice. You know, it's a real risk and a real fear that people's expectations will become, you know, exceed the reality and what's possible. And I think for us, it's really important to do that in our host city. I think we'd struggle to do that more remotely because we need to be on the ground constantly, in constant communication, in person, in situ, as much as we possibly can with the groups that we're working with. And so we can maintain that conversation about what's possible, what's speculative. You know, we start to become more detailed about the way that we describe the projects that we're doing. So we will call a project deliverable, or we'll call a project speculative, very clearly in the conversations that we're having with people. And I think as soon as they start to sort of we start to build a relationship with them, they understand the role of the students and this sort of imagination that can be brought into the room through speculative projects. We frame that very carefully within this idea of what if. And if we have multiple what ifs, people don't necessarily understand that they need to choose, or there's one that's going to happen. Do you see what I mean? So it's very much about building those notions of trust, I think, over time in that. It's really important.
Just to add to that, I think it's really important in our context to kind of broaden the shared definitions of what we mean by kind of urban development, because I guess at the beginning of the project, if you were to speak to people about urban development, they have an idea in their head about what that means and how that would develop. So a lot of the time, the kind of speculative what if projects kind of broaden that idea of what we might mean by urban development, broaden that conversation of what that might mean. So alongside kind of raising aspirations, it's about kind of broadening aspirations to kind of allow that conversation to be more complex.
I would like to ask this question as well to Badrun Gardi, because I think it's as well about raising expectations, what you did. And my question would be, so what's now the follow-up? So you have a built outcome there. So you have fulfilled an expectation, I suppose. And now what is developing out of that?
You know, I think that first step is incredibly crucial, having the built outcome, because I've been working on Gear District issues for the past 15 years. And before building the Gear Innovation Hub, it became quite obvious, you know, I would take lots of international students around and have conversations with Gear District residents. And the recurring theme for the past, few years before the Gear Innovation Hub was we've had this sort of a conversation with architects and planners and designers for 10 plus years, and nothing has changed. Nothing has been built, and as a result, people are just sort of sick of talking about their aspirations and what they hope to see in the community, especially when people are showing really nice designs that are only on paper that never get translated to tangible projects. So I think as an organization for Gear Hub, what was really crucial was for us to make sure that it becomes a tangible project. So partnering with Josh and actually having Gear Innovation Hub built was incredibly important. I can't stress that enough. But of course, once the building is built, that's really, again, only the beginning, sort of, because now you have to make sure that the space is active, that it actually becomes a vibrant place for programming, for people to gather, that it just doesn't become some sort of neglected space that no one uses. And so for us, it's really an opportunity to turn the Gear Innovation Hub into a laboratory of sorts to really test out lots of ideas for activities to really activate the community, to build that sense of community that allows for that, natural sort of social activities to take place. So again, for all of these sort of programming areas, we are looking to partner with local universities, local organizations, international organizations to co-create and co-develop workshops, training programs, educational programs that really target community members, so that we are delivering both things that we know that they need, that the community members know that they need, but also at the same time, things that maybe the community members are not aware that they're missing out on. And so I think as sort of curators of the space, it's important to understand what the local needs are, to have trust within the community, but also to bring in fresh ideas, new perspectives that could really add to the community.
So much, Badrin. Sorry.
Yeah, can I just add one thing? Yeah, I think, so Badrin really highlighted all the points, but I guess one thing is the Innovation Hub is one piece in a way. It was a catalyst for our further work in that particular area. We're now working on a series of affordable housing prototypes, and we're actually using, or the GERHub is actually helping us also engage the community, showing them designs, getting the feedback on the projects we're developing in that district itself. So we see this as a kind of way, as a kind of network model, in a sense, that can actually be this catalyst, can actually lead to the furthering of the improvements of their own plots and their own living conditions. Because I think for us, one of the really important next steps is really to improve the housing situation within these districts.
Thank you, Joshua. So this conversation is really only just beginning, and we have 2 more project presentations that we want to bring into that conversation, and also pull through all of the projects that we've already heard from, because there's so much more still to say about them, and we're only just, I think, warming ourselves up in what, this is quite, some very big issues have already been raised, and I think they're slightly hanging in the air. So, but we do need to give people a bit of a break. So we're going to meet back at 15:15. If you're on Greenwich Mean Time, it'll be 10:15 GMT. So at 15:15 the hour. So you can put your cameras and mics off, but stay on this call. We'll keep this call open. So please have a break and think about your questions, let it mull over in that break, and we'll come back, listen to 2 more, and then be able to speak with the benefit of all of the projects in our mind. So thank you so much for your attention so far. Please have a break and come back refreshed at 15:15.
So welcome back to this very interesting presentations and discussions. I fear that we have not enough time to speak together or to answer all these questions. I just wanted to remind you that there is a Q&A possibility, so you can ask questions in the Q&A or raise your hand or make you visible, that we can share the camera and the microphone with you. In the next block, we have 2 projects presented. One is from the Pacific Rim Community Network. It's the Ama drink stall in Singapore. And the second one is a project from the Social Economic Environmental Design Network. It's the Vertical University in Nepal. I just ask you to keep time, 15 minutes, including questions. Otherwise, we will cut off. So I wanted to briefly introduce Tan Meng Kiang and Ethan Chang. Dr. Tan Meng Kiang is an architect and associate professor at the Department of Architecture, National University of Singapore. She leads design studios and service learning projects in Singapore and South Asia. Ethan Chang is a Singaporean project architect with a focus on converging architecture making and community development to create livable spaces and shape a more socially resilient society. So thank you for being here and presenting your project. And I invite you to share the screen.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Ursula. Hi, I'm Beng Kiang, and co-presenting with me is Ethan Chung. He is one of the co-student leader in this project, and he has since graduated and started working. So first, I'm going to show you a video. Unfortunately, the video has no English narration, so please do read the subtitles. And then I'll follow by a couple of slides. So let me share screen the video first.
You could share.
这间水滩是在1995年开始，因为之前他们是做瑕疵的收入来的，然后当时因为瑕疵收了，他们没有收入，就开这间的水滩，是很简单的。他们当时自己我爸爸跟我妈妈家人几个人建起来，但是到了2018年的时候，国大的学生就来跟我们重建这阿嬷的水滩，所以就有现在比较卫生、比较方便、比较舒服的环境给顾客们的享受水在这里。
卖水的安尼是卖椰安尼赚，一箱椰是30粒，30粒你若卖到了，赚50块。我免去兄弟的钱，家己赚家己开会够啦。
Okay, so I'm going to share the slide, and Ethan and I will run you through it a little bit more about the project. Just a second. Yeah, so the project is in Singapore. Singapore is located in Southeast Asia. The project is on Pulau Ubin. It's an island, a short boat ride.
Prof, I don't think we are sharing any slides if you are.
Are you seeing the slide?
No.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, do you see the slide now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Sorry about the hiccup. So this project is in Singapore, and Singapore is located in Southeast Asia. And it's the project's on an island called Pulau Ubin, a short boat ride from mainland Singapore. This is the map of Pulau Ubin. Amma drink store is next to a river, and the past economic activities on this Pulau Ubin were rubber and fruit plantation, prawn farms, and granite quarries. And at its peak, the population was about 5,000 people. But after the quarries closed down in the 1980s, many residents moved to the mainland. Few residents remain on the island. So it is one of the last kampong or village left in a very urbanized Singapore. Most people know Pulau Ubin as a kind of sightseeing and recreation place for cycling with the abandoned quarries and the Chek Jawa wetland. Few know about its culture and heritage aspect. So Pulau Ubin is a very special and rustic place to many people. What has disappeared from the mainland can be found here, such as traditional timber houses, quarry, and village way of life. Some of the issues on the island are aging residents, and their timber kampong, or what we call village houses, need repair. And village life will disappear if nothing is done. And there's also the risk of losing the cultural heritage. So a group of us, academics, civil society organization, and volunteers are partnering the government to revitalize the Ubin community. We address both the physical and social aspects. So the drink store is actually a pilot project in the revitalization with these objectives. It's a test bed for future restoration of timber houses on Pulau Ubin, because the building codes used in the mainland may not be relevant for a village setting. It's also to provide the environment for Amma to continue her livelihood and bring more customers, and to document and promote heritage and intangible cultural practices of that particular location. What is significant is that it's a community-driven project, and it's the first Singapore public structure designed and built by students involving multiple stakeholders. Amma, in this picture, you see, or Granny in Hokkien dialect, is a nickname for Madam Ong. She's a very resilient and independent lady, and we are all very fond of her. The 25-year-old original dream store was a makeshift construction by her late husband and family members. It became unsafe due to ground settlement and subjected to occasional flooding. Over to you, Ethan.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So this is the final design proposed by the architecture students from National University of Singapore. Next slide. The key elements of the design is the raised timber deck, that is to mitigate flooding and also doubles up as a informal sitting. And what we did was that we used the blue color timber planks from the old store, and Ama herself requested the signages that were written by her late husband to be retained. So these elements help to keep the traces of the past alive. An exhibition wall displayed the information of the history of the store, Ama's family heritage, and also the surrounding nature and the reconstruction process. Prefabrication was adopted to reduce on-site work due to the weather and also because of the lack of electricity and also water at site. We use traditional interlocking joints whenever that's possible. Then all the timber parts were then brought to site and assembled. So through the participatory process, what we did was we engaged both Ama and her daughter through using models and also drawings for easy explanation. This is Ama's daughter sharing with the students about the old stories of living in Pulau Ubin. The Ama's family members and also other Ubin villagers also came in and also helped together with the student volunteers in the construction. And so this is some example of the blue planks that we salvaged and also in order to juxtapose with the new timber. What we had was also a knowledge transfer from a Ubin villager to the students about the traditional construction methods. We also did a larger community engagement with the other Ubin villagers in order to collect stories about Pulau Ubin.
Ethan, you have 4 minutes left, Ethan, sorry.
Oh, this is the last slide. So when we looking back at it now, we are glad that the new drink store is actually quite popular with the visitors as a pit stop. And from the whole team, we wish Ama to have a good business.
All right, we're done, Ursula. We can take some questions.
Thank you. So I give the voice to the audience to raise questions. No one.
Can I ask a simple question? This is Akiko. Did you need a building permission from the municipality for this?
Yes, that was one of the difficult things we encounter. Yeah, we have to go through the proper process. Like if we build any building, we had to submit to fire department, the various department. We had to get an engineer to sign off. We had to get the building permit, and we had to get the occupation permit before she can occupy the store.
Oh.
So that was the most painful part of the project.
I asked you because I have experience to build a bus stop, and it is by the road. So we need a permission of different stakeholders and of the police and the road managers and so on. And we built with the woods that we cut it from the mountains behind. So it was so difficult to meet the standard.
Yeah. So we at first we had resistance from the fire department about using timber. So we had to go through many rounds before we finally convinced them that there's no risk in this particular location. Yes. So my experience actually is most difficult to work in the so-called city or developed places. I bring students to Cambodia and Philippines, and we go to a village and we build something, and it can be done very fast.
Can I ask something, a follow-up? I think that's such a good question, Akiko, and just wondering whether there were any fears for Madam O about going from being perhaps more unofficial to being official, whether that was a fear that it might endanger her livelihood or put anything at risk?
Yeah, so the good thing is we partner with the government agency, so the National Parks Board, and they were on board right from the beginning. So they actually gave the funding for the construction, and the rest of the funding we fundraised. And in the end, it was legitimized, and she has a license to operate, and she has a lease. So everything is official. And we got a promise from the minister who visited the opening that the stall will stay.
Okay. I just have a small question. What did the neighbors say when they got to know that she got this renovated new fancy drink stall?
Okay, actually her stall is in a very remote part of the island. There are no neighbors at all.
Oh, right.
Yeah. The rest of the residents are living near the jetty where the boat lands. Yes, so there was no, this kind of issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we've reached time now.
Yes.
So, but we can return to this project as with the others in our main discussion section. So thank you both so much.
So thank you. We would go to the last project we have, the Vertical University in Nepal, which is presented by 4 co-creators I would like to introduce briefly. So there is Priyanka Bista. It's a Nepalian Canadian designer, researcher, and educator working at the intersection of public interest design and biodiversity conservation. She's a co-founder and design director of KTK Belt. I don't know if I pronounce it properly. Studio, a non-profit based in New York that works collaboratively with the local communities in Eastern Nepal. Then we have Lokendra Bahadur Jaka, a highly skilled farmer and local leader. He is a chairperson of the Tamor Permaculture Learning Grounds, a partner organization and collaborator for the Vertical University project. He's an indigenous leader of the vanishing Jakar ethnic group of Nepal and has been a lifelong advocate for the environment. Then we have Amrita Sardar. At age of 22, she's one of the youngest youth fellows currently engaged with the Toshi Tapu Learning Ground. She belongs to the indigenous Sardar caste group and currently lives within the buffer zone area of Koshi Tapu. And last, we have Ishita Mehra. She's a co-leader for the outdoor educational program at the Vertical University project. Ishita is a talented illustrator and also an advocate for mental health. She incorporates graphic design and practical training in mental health advocacy in educational workshops environment. Very warm welcome, and start your presentation, please. So would you start your presentation?
Yeah, I think Priyanka is just sharing the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Fine. Can you see now?
Okay. Thank you and namaste to everyone. Thank you to the Design for Common Good platform for providing us a space to present our project today. I am Ishita Mehra, Outdoor Education Co-Lead of the Vertical University project. To orient you to Nepal, it is a landlocked country located in South Asia between China and India.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we don't see your screen, so we just have a black board.
Sorry, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, now.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
As you can see on the screen, Nepal is the landlocked country. It's located in South Asia between China and India. And if you cut across the south to north cross section across this block, you get a similar profile that rises from the sea level to the highest Himalayas within a short distance of just 100 to 150 kilometers. Although it's only 0.09% of landmass of the Earth, this complex terrain has given birth to diversity of all kinds, both human and non-human, which is very inspirational. And so the vertical university as a concept emerged, embracing this learning potential inherent in this diverse vertical gradient of Nepal, starting at a 67-meter elevation in Koshitapu to Mount Kanchenjunga, which is the tallest peak in the world, at 8586 meters. The 6 nodes of this gradient follow individuals and community partners working with us in conservation. Our project fundamentally serves as a framework that enables local indigenous communities that are living in rich biodiverse landscapes to steward biodiversity conservation with their history and knowledge of their landscape. It seems like a pretty simple proposition, but it has not been easy for any of us to execute this community-based approach. And today we have 2 representatives from 2 very special nodes of the vertical university, which is Koshitapu and Kurle Tenupa. And both the representatives are very strong pioneers working on this community-based approach. And I would like to invite Amrita ji to share her experience.
Namaste, I'm Amrita Sardar. I belong to the Batar caste group and indigenous Dalit caste from the Tarai. According to our oral history, a long time ago, our community faced many hardships. So they ran into the jungles of Nepal from India. And throughout the years, started to live in the forest, learning closely how to use the natural resource. The word Batar itself echoes this relationship with the forest, Bon meaning forest and Tor meaning people. I live in a society that follows a caste hierarchy as well as patriarchy. Although I am both a minority caste and a woman, I didn't want to follow these rules and sit within the 4 walls of my household. I wanted to learn to earn and more importantly, make something of my life. So for the past 2.5 years, I have been working as the Koshitapu youth fellow and learning about my own landscape. Did you know that my hometown Koshitapu also has 526 bird species? Did you know that some of the birds migrate from Siberia to even Europe? Did you also know that some of these birds' population are declining by 19%? I have to confess that before I joined the project, I did not know this either. Koshitapu is paradise for birds, where birds from around the world can to see, but I only saw the crows and sparrows. I didn't see the hundreds of other species that rely on our wetlands, our grasslands, and our rivers. Although communities like mine live in biodiverse rich landscape and also have the capacity of working towards conservation, we actually are never engaged with, and our relationship to the environment is not respected. For the past year, I have had the pleasure of working and learning for Swapnil Sir, outland restorationist, to turn 6.7 hectares of land into a wetland learning ground. And just within months, we actually started spotting birds such as the rare falcated, lesser adjutant, and other indigenous species. By now, we have employed over 100 people restoration work. We have been able to scale on awareness campaigns, and we have expanded our restoration activities into the reserve. Even though in the beginning it was very hard, now after seeing our success, everyone is realizing that the local community can also do the conservation. So for me, what the vertical university is an opportunity young people like myself to work on biodiversity conservation, whether it Koshitapu, Angsila, or Papu. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrita ji. Now Lokendra Yaka ji will speak and I will be the translator.
नमस्कार, मेरो नाम लोकेन्द्र कुमार याखा हो, कुर्ले तिनुपा। यो 45 सालमा चाहिँ भूकम्प गएर त्यहाँ चाहिँ पानीको मन सुक्दै गरेर लास्ट के भयो भने त्यहाँको मान्छेहरू चाहिँ बसाइ जान सुरु गरे। जान सुरु गरेपछि त्यहाँ बडो अचम्म भयो। त्यहाँ त्यो पछि चाहिँ केटी बेल्ट संस्था हाम्रो पछिपछि तमर लर्निङ ग्राउन्ड संस्थाले बनायो। त्यहाँदेखि हामीलाई चाहिँ तालिममा याङसिला बोलाइयो। याङसिलाको तालिम सिकेर हामीले चाहिँ आकाशे पानी कसरी भेला पार्न सकिन्छ भनेर हामी माथि तमर लर्निङ ग्राउन्ड गरेर सिक्यौँ, काम गऱ्यौँ। त्यो काम गरेर त्यो प्लास्टिक पोखरी बनाएको देखेर त्यहाँ गाउँका मान्छेहरूले पनि घर घरमा प्लास्टिक पोखरी बनाए। पहिले एक मुठा साग किन्न जानलाई एक मुठा साग ल्याउनको लागि बजार जानु पर्थ्यो। अहिले त्यो चुल्हा चौकामा नाच्ने सागसब्जी उत्पादन गरिरहेका छन्। र अहिले त्यहाँनिर सिकाइ थलो चाहिँ राम्ररी भएको छ। विद्यार्थीहरू सिक्ने आउने, हेर्ने आउने, युवा शक्तिहरू सिक्ने र यहाँ बिरुवाहरू लाउने काम पनि राम्रो। यो राम्रो उद्देश्य कुर्ले तेनुपामा यो संस्थाले राम्रो इमेज छरेको छ। र पत्रकारहरू पनि अस्ति गाउँ विकास समिति गाउँपालिकादेखि पनि पत्रकार फोटोग्राफरहरू आउनुभएको थियो। अनि यहाँनिर पनि तालिम केन्द्र बनाउनुपर्छ, तालिम सिक्ने ठाउँ बनाउनुपर्छ, तालिम दिनुपर्छ। र यो तालिम दिएर त्यहाँको त्यो त्यही एरियामा त्यहाँको मान्छेहरूलाई आफै आत्मनिर्भरता बनाउनुपर्छ। र यो हाम्रो यो त्यो विदेशी मल भन्छ, यो त्यो मललाई चाहिँ नल्याउने यो चाहिँ अर्ग्यानिक मल बनाउने त्यो तरिका तालिमहरू दिने सिकाउने गरेर त्यहाँको स्वास्थ्यकर चिजहरू चाहिँ बनाउनुपर्छ भन्ने हाम्रो लक्ष्य हो। र त्यहाँ विद्यार्थीहरूले सिक्ने पनि गरेछन्, गाउँकाले पनि सिकेका छन्। र अन्तमा त्यहाँनिर त्यो संस्थामा आएको पैसा चाहिँ बालुवामा होइन बिरुवामा जाओस्, यसलाई दिएको जीवनता चाहिँ राख्नुपर्छ, हामीले त्यो राख्नुपर्छ। र अन्त्यमा मेरो भनाइ के छ भने यसो जीवित सबैले राखौँ भनेर चाहिँ हामी होस् भन्ने हाम्रो कामना लक्ष्य छ। र यति भन्दा मेरो 2 शब्द यही टुक्न चाहन्छु। हस्, धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Lokendraji. So my community in Kurule Tenupa actually faced a lot of hardships after our water springs started drying. This trend resulted in further outmigration of not only people, but also birds leaving Kurule. The birth of our project actually happened 3 to 3.5 years ago when they started working with us and met Binod Puri Sir, who's a biointensive trainer. And this is where we received tools and methods from him. And then when we came back to our community and we actually said, you know, we're going to start planting trees and plants in this forest, everyone started laughing and saying, you're crazy, this will never happen. So nonetheless, we built a rainwater catchment pond and started developing this biointensive farm. Today, our farm is very successful. The soil has regenerated, but most importantly, we've proven that that we can grow vegetables in the soil of Kurule. And so many young people and children as well have come to our farm and see it as an inspiration and take many lessons back to their farm plots. So for him, he's really interested in making sure that this project sustains and is successful. And our next phase is all about actually building this site into a training center for other farmers. Okay, thank you, Yakaji. So as the co-founder of this project, what is most exciting for me to see right now is how each node, each project, each individual is evolving, adapting, and creating their own versions of the vertical university. In just 6 years since our inception, we've gone from a 3-person volunteer team to a network of 8 organizations, all Indigenous-led. From starting with 1 youth fellow, we now have a cohort of 15 young local activists like Amritaji who've become trailblazers for conservation work. From starting with place-based education in 1 node, we now have scaled in online outdoor learning programs to 4 nodes. From 1 learning grounds, we now have a network of incredibly biodiversity-rich land trusts. From a community-level conservation project, we've now moved to a landscape-level conservation, and we even have financial backing from large donors like Rainforest Trust and Swift Foundations. Today, the project is in a transition period. In the next 5 years, we will be dissolving the New York-based nonprofit, KTK Belt, which will then allow the 7 organizations, local organizations, to run the vertical university and sustain it. we finally fully have also started, and now is the turn where we are actually starting to activate the built interventions on top of a network of financial, social, administrative, operational infrastructure. In 2015, if we started by asking the question, what is the vertical university? Today we're asking, how do we scale this vertical university? And finally, our next question is actually going to be, how do we sustain and institutionalize this vertical university beyond our own involvement? When I asked Yakaji recently what his goal was for the future, he said it was to create something that will last 100 generations. Something I can't really comprehend or fathom. So with that note, I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, all four speakers. Thank you for this insight. I think it's really amazing, an amazing project, and I think there are lots of questions. So please put them on the table. Who wants to start?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can I really enjoyed the presentations, and I just want to ask the group of the last presentation about this desire to institutionalize the vertical university. I'd like to understand what you mean by that, what your sort of desire around that is, and what the benefits might be to institutionalize it.
So there are certain parts that we would really definitely want to institutionalize, like the outdoor education part in particular. So we currently work with government schools across this vertical node. And again, for me, what was really important is that kids and young people like Amritaji and the kids who are born and brought up in this landscape actually don't have any tools to understand their landscape, which is a real tragedy because they can steward conservation. So projects like that, as well as we also have something called the Indigenous Knowledge Portal Project, where we are actually documenting knowledge of elders, not we, the young people are. So these are the different types of projects that we've prototyped that we would want to institutionalize. So it hopefully goes into more schools, more communities. Yeah.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, Carolyn?
Yes, it did. Thank you, Priyanka. And I just think it raises a really interesting concern around what we mean by institution. And I think, you know, from a big institutional university, we're actually quite keen to deinstitutionalize what we do in a way. So, you know, I think there's quite a lot to unpack there, but I find it really interesting, the questions back to us as institutions, as universities, that comes out of this sort of work. How do we need to change, to transform ourselves? And I'm really inspired by your model and how you've developed it so far. It's really interesting.
So we actually spent a lot of time being in the grassroots initially, and we were really successful in that way. But around 2017, when the entire political structure of Nepal changed, it seemed like overnight for us because I was very much unaware of the political changes in Nepal. That's so what happened was, like, from the central government, everything was federal. It became a federal state with decentralized governments. So in this case, we had to kind of mainstream ourselves as well, so that the government also were able to understand what we were doing. And there were many different administrative entities that suddenly we had to be responsible for reporting to, so I think definitely, I think, I mean, our approach initially was from the bottom up, but then we realized that if we don't actually engage properly with the governments and other institutions, that we actually risk the failure of the project. And there's lots of attacks, you know, you name it. We're trying to do environmental work, so it just became very difficult. So I think we're just trying to understand, how do we keep that spirit of the grassroots, but at the same time, how do we make sure that there are certain parts that then go into the curriculum or other aspects. But yeah, I was not in favor of it initially, but yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we can now smoothly go over to the general discussion. We're just about to do that. I start with a question for that to the Vertical University and to Lokendra as well, Jaka as well. So it's not just about co-design and starting a project, but it's to maintain a project during a lifetime. So how could the people you need for that, for all this this trip from all the length of this Vertical University, how could you involve them so that they're able to keep their livelihood, so that they work for the project but as well have their own income?
याकाजी उहाँले के सोध्नु भयो भने यो प्रोजेक्ट जुन सस्टेनेबिलिटी हामी भन्छौँ नि 100औं पुस्ता यो चाहिँ कसरी सस्टेन गर्ने, मान्छेहरूलाई इन्कम चाहिन्छ हैन, यो सबै कुराहरू। सो कसरी चाहिँ हामीले गर्छौँ होला, यो हजुरलाई केही जवाफ छ होला हजुरको?
यो कन्सेप्ट गर्नलाई हामीले पहिलो कुरा चाहिँ यस्तो हुन्छ म्याम, मान्छेले सिक्नु खोज्नुपर्छ। मेन कुरा चाहिँ हामीले सिकाएर मात्रै चाहिँ हुन्छ, उसले चाहिँ सिक्नु पर्यो। सिकाउनलाई हामीले कन्जुसै गर्नु हुँदैन। र यो संस्थामा तपाईको 2-4 वटा कुरा चाहिँ हामीले एकदम यसरी राख्नुपर्छ संस्था बचाउनलाई। पहिलो कुरा समितिद्वारा हुनु पर्यो, दोस्रोमा लेखा हुनु पर्यो, लेखाद्वारा राम्रो हुनु पर्यो, तेस्रोमा भनेको राजनीति विशुद्ध हुनुपर्छ, चौथोमा भनेको धर्म विशुद्ध हुनुपर्छ। त्यहाँ राजनीतिको भरमा कसैले राजनीति गरेर धर्मसँग गरेर लेखा राम्रो भएन, समिति भएन भने यो संस्था चाहिँ राम्ररी चल्न सक्दैन जस्तो लाग्छ हामीलाई चाहिँ। यो संस्था त जीवन्त बचाउनु पर्ने हो। त्यसरी सिक्नु सिकाउने आत्मा अर्काले गर भनेर हैन म चाहिँ गर्छु भन्ने खालको हामीले वातावरण बनाएर जानुपर्छ। यो अब मान्छे भनेको त जहिले तहिले त बाँचिँदैन, यो पालो पुस्ता हो, त्यसरी हुन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई।
Okay, so what he's saying is that so first and foremost, there has to be an interest in learning, and we have to cultivate that. People need to be interested to learn, and for me as well, that has been the biggest sort of lesson. Like, if there's no interest, there's no project, nothing. You cannot move beyond that. And then in terms of, I think what he's also struggling with right now, what we all are, is that we've created these organizations, and to sustain it, the organizations is also important. So what he's saying is that the board of the organization needs to be really strong. The accounting has to be really strong. It needs to be apolitical, no religion, because again, in terms of the political, attacks and all sorts of things that happens. But I think then further to talk about income and livelihood, this is a question that we always struggle with. What Yakaji and his team have done is actually they've showcased a farm with the farmers' mindset. I mean, because they are farmers themselves in mind, because farmers don't have donors like Rainforest or all of these organizations. But what they need to see is actually demonstration that it works, right? And so what has happened actually, even without us, because we've failed continuously when we try to do livelihood projects, but what has actually happened is that they've come to the farm and they've taken the lessons, and they've learned from Binod sir, the teacher, and them as well, about how to grow vegetables in that soil. How and how to collect water and other infrastructure. So I think in terms of our approach, we still don't have the income part figured out, and that's something that we're working on. But really demonstrating and speaking, and creating that space for learning is what collectively I think we all are trying to do.
Thank you so much. So now we're in a sort of general conversation and discussion section of the event, our final chance to ask each other questions and get the conversation really going. And we were getting to a very interesting point at the end of the first block. So bringing all of the presenters and all of the of the audience members into this conversation now as you want to.
We have one question in the chat. I might read that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there was a question from Vandana Patmanabhan, sorry if I don't pronounce it right. Have you ever experienced a project process or a process where a participatory approach did not work? If there was, how did you take the process forward?
So this could be a question for anyone, either a panelist, keynote, or an audience member, anybody that would like to speak on that subject.
It seemed that they all have been successful, so there is no answer to it.
Actually, I can speak on that behalf. So actually the project started from failure. And 13 years ago when I went to Nepal, I was born there, but I had moved to Canada, did my degree. And then when I went back, I actually went back with a very clear brief to design and build a school. But what I was noticing was the environmental changes, the social changes that was happening all throughout. And so in the community where I was where I was the quote unquote architect designing and building a school, we actually tried to speak with the community about an environmental direction, and what we realized was that the community wasn't interested. We tried, myself and Rajiv, who's the co-founder, tried. And at the end of the day, we had to just give up and say, you know what? It's not good. What we've tried to do is really a failure because it's not talking in the same development language that they're able to understand. We're not building schools or water projects or roads. And so I think it's really what Yakaji said is very important. Then we realized that we have to only go to communities that have an interest. Not everybody is going to be interested in environmental conservation. It's not, and that's okay. That's completely fine. And so I think for us, that shift was where we met individuals like Lokindra Yakaji, Kumar Sir, a lot of different individuals. Then you can start the conversation forward. Yeah.
I have a hand raised from Akiko and a hand raised from Badrun. So Akiko, please.
Okay. I think that participatory approach is needed when apparently a participatory approach doesn't work. Because we have a lot of experience in Japan with the aging society. And the problem of the aging society is elders who are living alone. And without participatory approach, we can't reach to them. So the participatory approach, I think, is needed. I'm not sure if everybody's agree with me, but normally participatory approach always doesn't work, apparently. That is when we need the participatory approach.
Thank you, Badrun.
It might be a slightly different topic, but I sort of alluded to this in my previous response, in that, sometimes community members are just unaware of certain things, unaware of certain paths that you can potentially take. So as an example, we have another collaboration with Rural Urban Framework, which is called the GARE plugin. It's basically, the GARE is the Mongolian yurt, the nomadic dwelling. And this GARE plugin structure is basically, and Jersey can explain much better as the architect, but it's this structure that can plug into an existing traditional GARE that has off-grid infrastructure, like a toilet system, heating system, and so forth. Basically, what we observe in the GARE districts is that what's currently happening is it goes from people living in GAREs to just building, a self-built house. And that's really the only sort of way and path forward that a lot of community members see. What we wanted to present with the GARE plugin idea was that there could potentially be a different sort of path forward that entails, modernizing and modifying the gears so that it's a more suitable form of housing for urban settlements. And so I think rather than presenting the gear plugin as this be-all encompassing sort of solution for housing in Mongolia, I see personally it as an opportunity to present a completely unique and different path forward that then community members can really see and observe for themselves, and then really build on top of it, and critique and see if there are other ideas that come from it. So I think again, that it involves participation on all levels, but I just wanted to mention that it's important for the designer and the architect to potentially bring about these other ideas that people may not be already exposed to.
Thank you. Caroline.
Yeah, thanks. Just to sort of talk about participation that doesn't work. I mean, just to give you a sort of distinct example, we did a live project once with a community group in Sheffield, and through the process of working with the students, the community group decided to disband. I mean, you could say that was a participation process that didn't work because it didn't follow onto the project that they were hoping to do, but actually they found that to be quite a positive outcome because they realized they didn't have the capacity to do what they were sort of acting up towards, and they all went off and joined other groups and pursued their objectives in different ways. So actually, I mean, I suppose what I'm saying by that, if things look as if they're not working, actually they might be working in other ways that you hadn't predicted. But also, I think, just because things are happening in a participatory way doesn't mean that they're going to work, that they're good, that it's good work, because I think we're constantly aware of the reputation that the university has in our city, and I think it happens a lot in other cities as well, other places as well, that the local population think of the university as an extractive institution through its research and its teaching. And there might be an awful lot of participatory projects that are happening, but they're not necessarily benefiting the community. They might be very beneficial to the students. And I think there's more impetus now, there's more expectation that our students are getting that live experience. And we're asking an awful lot of our communities, more and more of our communities, because of that expectation. And so I think we're at risk of participation not working more and more, actually, if we're not careful.
I would encourage the audience, which is not the center, to raise questions if you want through the Q&A. Oh,
that was my fault, sorry.
Okay.
It should be fine now.
Would you?
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask a question while we're just just slightly following on from what's been said in the last few presentations. I was just wondering whether anybody would like to speak about the particular benefits that either young people or older people can bring to a project with, as members of the community, whether there's anything to do with age that can be a particular benefit that they could bring to a project. And you don't need to answer that if nobody has anything to say to that one. It just seemed like a theme that was coming up in the last few.
I think we have a question.
Comment a little
sorry.
Just to that question, my organization, we love working with children and youth, and the reason we really see that is that there's a certain level of open-mindedness and flexibility in their thinking that we observe don't really exist once you become not even old, but adults. And so I think one of the main things that we need to have in Mongolia to fix a lot of the problems that we have in the Gear district is to completely take a different approach as to what is needed. Just as an example, what I like to say is that, you know, because of our nomadic tradition, one of the sort of skill sets that nomadic herders must possess, one of the main skill sets that you must possess is the ability to adapt to any situation. So adapting to difficult environmental circumstances and so forth. And, you know, that's both a good and a bad. The bad part comes when you come into the city and, you know, you're living in the Gear district where there's no infrastructure, nothing, the world's worst air pollution in the winter, and you don't do much about it. You don't do much to change the environment, but you rather adapt to it. And I think that's sort of the, you know, skill set backfiring for a lot of adults. So what we are trying to do is push more of the children and the youth to take a proactive stance in terms of identifying issues in the community and then taking steps to address them.
Thank you.
I think just to add one more comment. So we also heavily work with young people and also elderly individuals. And for us, for me, what I found is that when you start engaging young people and getting them, you're actually creating the circle bigger. They, in fact, end up like reaching out to other people. And then, so, and also in terms of when you're thinking about sustainability, really, I think engaging the young people and the younger and even younger generation is extremely critical. And then also for us, what's really important is individuals like Yakaji, like his knowledge and other individuals are passed down. So, and to attract young people in conservation, what I've realized is that you need to have technology, you need to make it trendy, you need to make it cool, you know, and otherwise they aren't, you know, just like you or I maybe would not be interested. But once they're engaged in the project, then the impact just, you know, goes 100-fold. Yeah.
There is a question from Orit, so I would like to have her speaking now.
Thank you.
Orit, yeah, please.
Not so much of a question, just kind of a little comment to follow up what Caroline said before about participatory projects. I think what I find fantastic about participatory project is the fact that it's expand a little bit the idea of architecture, not as a single event, but it's something that has a process and take time and take into account different users. But there is also somewhat an underlying assumption that the participation gives voice to the different user groups. But as we saw in Jyoti's example, the user group, even within one season, can change and have different needs. So I think we just need to bear in mind that whatever the circumstances are, it's still going to be a long process in which participants, even if they'll carry the same name, might have different needs. And the idea of adaptability should be kind of somehow be kept or measured to see, or different measures to see whether or not the project or the project is still successful. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Would anybody like to comment on Orit's remarks? I think the idea of design or architecture as a process that takes time is something that's been very clear from an awful lot of the presentations. And there seems like an idea of commitment and generosity and mutual benefit that's necessary to sustain something over the longer term. And this session is very much about telling stories and sharing the journey. So if any of you have any wisdom on going, the long haul with a project that to help others do the same, I think that would be very welcome. Jyoti, yes, please. We don't hear you. Your mute's on.
So, sorry. Just sort of responding to the idea of the long haul, and also maybe about the university's position as a taker rather than a giver. There's, I think from my perspective, I can see two things happening. There's a motivation through educational projects to provide students with unique learning experience, and there's a collateral benefit of that, which is a community impact that's quite immediate. And I think looking at the long-term student benefit and creating architecture graduates who have a social and environmental conscience and a place in the world, we've talked about the challenge in measuring that and how that's done. And I don't know, but I'm interested, I guess, to ask how anyone who's been in the game a long time might consider what the long-term impact of students going through projects like this is in 10 or 20 years, 30 years. What's the long-term benefit to society of students who have gone through these projects? Because from my perspective, that's the long-term goal in terms of a common good, a community input. There are a lot of short-term, small-scale benefits to communities, but the long-term, I think, good to the kind of educational program that we're working on is much broader, but very hard to measure.
Maybe I'll put Ethan on the spot, since he's a student who has gone through a project and now he's working. Maybe he could share what he thinks his involvement has an impact or no impact on him.
Sure. What I would think about is that you're essentially training the new batch of younger generation architects or designers and practitioners coming up. So personally myself, what I'm already doing is to also identify certain champions or individuals that has more that align in the looking at architecture through a different lens, through not the usual the practice that we are all very used to, but it's something that is going beyond what the practice is about. So I think that is something that is also in the talks, that how we try to identify and also bring out the new generation of practitioners coming in to join the whole community. Yeah. So I think that's actually something that is quite meaningful. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ethan.
Maybe I could share to Jyoti's question, right? The experience is not just about design and build. Some of the projects I do is about serving the community and outside Singapore, like in Southeast Asia. And I can't expect all the graduates to want to become go into this line and have a practice because they have to survive. But I have seen cases where they go and work in a commercial company, and after that they leave and they do something much more meaningful that has impact on the community. Like one of the students who went with me on one of the very early trips to Philippines, he has now joined an NGO that does participatory design kind of thing. And that is after practicing in kind of commercial company. And then there are students who, after they leave, they may start their own sort of community service projects. Yeah. So I can't expect everyone who goes through it to do it as a profession, but if I can build empathy in them, I think that's already a great thing to do. Empathy in anything they design. So yeah, that's my take on your question.
Thank you so much. We've got a queue of hands now. So I think Akiko might have been the first to put her hand up. You're muted, Akiko.
I always combine a long-term project with the short-term, organized with the massive students projects. always. And with the long-term, not well-organized, not so organized projects, some of the students become architects in the local city, for example. It has happened 10 years ago. One architect that one student, he was involved in some our projects. He became architect in that city. And last year, one who participated in the design build project in the same field, he became a carpenter. So I think not as Ban Kim explained, not all the students become this kind of professionals, but it's a minority. But I have a lot of students becoming a practitioner in this kind of design build projects.
Thank you so much. I think, Tom, you were next.
Yeah, just I guess to give a kind of personal anecdote from my experience, because I came back to Sheffield in 2016, having grew up here in the city, to start my architectural masters to gain my kind of professional accreditation. But the first 6 weeks of my course on the masters was this live project, Revealing the Castle, which was part of the presentation today. And it kind of gave me this sense of agency in a place that I'd previously always just been a place that I'd enjoyed or existed in. And then all of a sudden being able to kind of have that experience of, you know, working with the people that I would be interacting with on my day-to-day life towards, you know, to use your phrase, the common good, you know, kickstarted a transformation, which now, instead of going for my professional architectural accreditation, I'm now doing my PhD, continuing to work with these communities, set up a social enterprise last year. So while, you know, not all of that is necessarily a direct consequence of live education, it certainly opened my eyes to a different way of practicing architecture.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I know we've got two hands queued up, but I just wondered, given what you just said, Tom, whether it might be, no pressure, Amrita, but I wondered whether Amrita might want to say anything about having agency in her area, but not necessarily using that agency to build architecture, but in other ways. Priyanka or Amrita, is there anything that you would like to say about building agency in the local area?
Amrita ji, उहाँले बुझ्नुभयो तपाईले उहाँले भन्नुभएको के भने लाइक जस्तो तपाई एउटा स्टुडेन्ट जस्तै भयो नि त भर्टिकल युनिभर्सिटीको हैन अनि सो कसरी चाहिँ नि तपाईलाई के लाग्छ हैन यङ मान्छेहरु लाइक यसको लङ टर्म इम्प्याक्ट के हो हैन अनि एजेन्सी जुन हुन्छ आफ्नो आत्मबल त्यसको बारेमा के भन्न चाहनुहुन्छ Sorry, I'm not sure if I translated properly, but let's see. हजुर के भन्नुहुन्छ जस्तो तपाईले जुन ट्रेनिङहरु पाइराख्नु भएको छ हैन त्यसले चाहिँ त्यसको इम्प्याक्ट चाहिँ के होला युवाहरुमा हैन के होला जस्तो लाग्छ
युवाहरुमा भन्दा त अब उनीहरुले खास गरी हामी जस्तै अब सिक्ने हो हामीले पनि पहिला केही हेरेको थिएनौं अहिले हामी सिक्ने क्रममै छौं सिक्दै गर्दा जाँदाखेरि हामीले अब जस्तै बर्ड्सहरुको बारेमा सिक्यो भने उनीहरु बर्ड वाचर पनि हुन सक्छ त्यसले गर्दा आफ्नो दैनिक स्थिति अगाडि बढाउन सक्छ अनि जस्तै अब हामीले हरेक एरियामा अब एउटा फोटोग्राफी हामीले सिक्यो फोटोग्राफीमा पनि उनीहरु अगाडि बढ्दै जान सक्छ हामीले लाइभलीहुडमा अब एजुकेसनको बारेमा भन्दाखेरि एजुकेसन हामी विद्यार्थीहरुलाई दिन्छौं एज अ टिचर उनीहरुले त्यो त्यतिर पनि ध्यान दिन सक्छन् मलाई त्यति चाहिँ लाग्छ
Sorry, my internet went out as she was speaking, but I think what she said is that there's a lot of trainings which she has received and also has given to other students, and they can learn from this process. Sorry, I don't know if I translated properly.
Thank you so much. So we've got two hands up. We've got Ursula, you've got your hand up.
Yes. Yeah, I would like to comment on the long-term view and the learning outcome, because I have several students now running through design build projects who did then jobs in the normal professional architecture offices, coming back to me and asking, I can't stand that anymore. So do you have any ideas what to do to have a meaningful professional life? So to make meaningful projects, that means to engage, to have empathy, to have the possibility to make a change as well. So to receive that you are able to make change. And somehow then I think that we are spoiling students and we are raising expectations in the students on how to work, especially how to work together in a group. This is, I think, what they really learn is that when they work together in a group, they can really achieve a lot of things. I'm sure this is not just for the student side, but as well maybe for the other participants of these projects. But somehow it's a good effect. On the other side, it's a stressful effect for the students, because I think they can't achieve what they want, or it's hard to achieve what they want and what they learned during this experience with these projects.
Thank you. And Rohini, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you. I actually, some of the questions that I had ended up getting answered by Ben Kiang, by Akiko, by Ursula, because one of the points I was trying to raise actually after what Ben Kiang said about her students who go into the commercial space and then come back to work for communities. And the only thing that you can hope for is that the empathy that they learn through the process in the universities is something they carry with them in their professional space as well. And I think the problem at this point is that the professional space is so distinct, looks at it so distinctly, that there is working with the communities is such a social, non-commercial space, versus the commercial projects. You think it's very cold-hearted. There's no room for empathy. And I think to bridge that gap that Ursula is talking about, that we're setting up expectations by they learn things in a certain way, but the real world is so different. Is that if that empathy then becomes the norm in the commercial space as well, like if it's possible to have that empathy for your clients, whoever they may be, irrespective of whether it's a marginalized community or not, where participatory design and hearing people out and understanding what they want and their needs and interests become a part of the process and not something that's reserved only for the nonprofit sector. I think that's a major gap in between what we learn in universities versus what the real world teaches us. I had one question. I think Tom had raised this point in the chat earlier about the metrics and how we evaluate these projects. And since a lot of the benefits tend to be intangible, especially when we're doing transfer of knowledge between generations and preserving the indigenous knowledge and culture, how is it that have any of you, any of the universities or any of the organizations here been able to convince financial organizations or even governmental bodies about evaluating projects differently, and what possibly could be the metrics that they use, whether if they can't be captured in numbers, and to still show that the project has merit so that they remain sustainable? Because we're also talking about people having aspirations and they want to earn money as well. So how do you make it financially viable for them to continue working in such a space? Sorry for that long question.
Would anybody like to jump in on the second part of Rohini's question about making the projects financially viable?
No. But there is an ongoing process in a German from a German curator, and she's trying to set up like a sort of evaluation matrix for the different stakeholders. I don't know. She was here. She was with us at the beginning. I don't know. So it might be a follow-up in the next month that there is some achievement.
So as with the first session, just as it really starts to get interesting, we start to run out of time. I'm so sorry, I don't know. We've got 2 hands up, so I think if we just take the comment from Carolyn and Ishita, and then we've got a few final closing words for you. So Carolyn, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Yes, I was going to talk a bit more about how I think universities need to step up and deal with this long-term building of relationships, and how we can support our students to continue the good work that they've been doing within their curricula. And I think universities need to be much more active in incubating emergent practices out of this work. And investing in new practices and alternative forms of working together. I think we launch our students out into the world hopeful, but we don't necessarily track their journeys, and we certainly don't track them over 20, 30 years. And I think as universities, as institutions with that sort of resources and capacity, I think we should be stepping up and doing that evaluation and nurturing it more actively as well.
No, it's
thank you, Carolyn. I think that's an excellent point, and certainly a very important piece of work to be done. And then finally, I think that Ishita, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to earlier just circle back to what Amrita ji was also saying. More of about, I felt personally that when it comes to education, sometimes it can be easy to be cynical that it may not be the only, I think, way out, or look at it in the long haul of how it helps or impacts students. But there's a lot of learning in between teachers as well as the students or the facilitators and the local communities. And I think that to recognize that to begin with, when we work with communities, I think there's so much sensitivity, understanding the identity we come from, because it's not about dominating or influencing their idea or dominating your idea on them, but it's working with them and then recognizing that they have the power and the knowledge, of course, to take it forward. It's just some push or some help that we've provided as an ally, but because I heard this in between the language, in between this conversation about how what if these communities are flanked? And I don't believe that it's the same way to look at sometimes indigenous communities when their land is being degraded and they're actually trying their best to help it out. But as designers, we are in no position to say that we are the ones who are the only solution, I feel. So coming from that background and into spacing that into education and helping with the trainings, like I really appreciate like working with KTK, how the major idea was that we did realize that there is a form of empathy already. And I sometimes believe, that's just my opinion, I think it's a very Western idea that to think that maybe people don't have empathy, but I think they really have the empathy. But there's, in that cultural context, I feel there's a loss of knowledge being transmitted due to various other reasons. It's been pushed out. And it was more about empowering young people or even old people, everyone actually, empowering them to know about their land, because after that, it felt like they can do literally anything for their land. That's all.
Thank you so much. I think that's a beautiful point to end on. So we're just going to wrap up with a question to everyone from Design for the Common Good. Do you want to ask it, Ursula?
Yes, I would like to encourage you to think about what you expect from what we call Network for Design for the Common Good. So what is your hope regarding what we all together could maybe achieve?
So if you have any thoughts for us, either immediately or in the future, you know, that would be really appreciated. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts now. I mean, obviously we've had this conversation today and we've got another one on the 19th, but has anybody got any thoughts of your interpretation of what Design for the Common Good could be, or how we could be help? Carolyn?
It's just an opportunity to say thank you to you for asking us to make a film, because it's the sort of thing we've been meaning to do and just haven't got around to. And then you asked us to do it. And actually, just going back to site and asking people, how's this going? Is this working for you? Making a nice film that we can now show people was just a really, really good thing for us to be prompted to do. So thank you. So if there's more of that, perhaps, you know, a sort of database of films, you know, just to sort of collate the evidence really of the process as it's happening, because we tend to see a lot of the outcomes, but we don't necessarily get a sense of the process as they're happening. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. That's brilliant, Carolyn, because it's certainly for us trying to understand, you know, we weren't just trying to understand the objects for sure. And, you know, it was the process, the place, the people, the whole thing, and the films just hugely helped us with that. So yeah, that's really good to know. Thank you. Is there anything else anybody would like to offer?
I think one more thing that I want to mention is what you mentioned earlier about the network engaging, you know, people that aren't represented. I think it's very important to focus on that effort because, you know, individuals like Yakaji or Amritaji, you know, all of these, there are ways to actually do that. It takes a lot of effort, actually, and yeah, I would strongly suggest, you know, creating that kind of platform.
It was planned. So we started as well this conversation with this initial thought, but in the process of doing it, we realized it's really difficult what you say, and we appreciate every help and support in this direction to get people to communicate with each other, with professionals, with community. So thank you. Yeah. And please support.
Yeah, we appreciate that you all put in a lot of effort to make those films and go and speak to people and get them involved in this. We realized that was more than the usual what you're asked to do. So thank you so much. Thoughts, welcome to, you know how to get in touch with us if you've got any other thoughts about Design for the Common Good. I'm going to just quickly share my screen to just remind you of the Design for the Common Good web page. Can you see my screen with the Design for the Common Good web page? I think you can.
Yes. Yeah,
we can. Thank you. So it's just to say, you know, if you'd like to stay in touch with each other or get involved with more Design for the Common Good events, then you can register for what is now soft launched platform, which is the web page that I'm showing you now. And the address is just designforthecommongood.net. And you on that web, you can see the current projects that are in the current exhibition in Denver. You can link to the conference events that are going on at the moment. As I said, there's a second online conversation on the 19th of March with there's 6 projects being presented at that one. And tomorrow and the next day, yeah, that's right. It's the 4th and the 5th of March. There's the Structures for Inclusion conference happening in Denver, but also accessible online. So you're very welcome to drop in and out of as many of those free events as you would like to. And so you can also log in and register for the Design for the Common Good website, and you'll find that within that there's a little network of other members who you can communicate with and share things with. And what we're hoping is that it isn't a website as such, it's a platform for collaboration and communication between all of you, that we would like it to be useful for you. So community members are welcome to register. It's not just for the designers or anything like that. So that's a short sort of attempt to explain what we're trying to launch with this platform, just to get that sharing and communication really going amongst all of you. I hope that I've said that clearly. I think that's all we wanted to say about that. But you know, you're bound to hear from us as we try to develop that over the next months and probably years if it goes well. So I'm going to say thank you very much to all of you for your patience, attention, amazing inputs from everyone. It's been quite an incredible experience to learn more about everyone's work. Ursula, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, I want to thank especially Rohini because she did a absolutely wonderful, great work in the background, setting up this conversation that helped us to get connected. And of course, thank you all of you. Thank you, Akiko, for this inspiring keynote and comments. We wish you all the best for your projects and keep connected with them and tell us more about how they develop and how you develop. And hope to see you the 19th. Maybe it's not the best time for you.
Yes, it's designed for, the projects are all in another time zone, so it might not be comfortable timing for everyone, but if you feel like staying up late or getting up early, then please join us.